Usually with a television series, the first season is the worst one, the most unhinged, the one that they're like, just get through that one and the rest of it's okay. And for that reason, I was not planning on watching another season of Seventh Heaven because I figured it's not gonna get worse. It couldn't get worse. Yeah. Now, I was planning on putting Seventh Heaven away to the recesses of my brain forever to live out with a YouTube video that maybe nobody would ever watch, but I was wrong. I mean, at least 4 people wanted me to do season 2. And that's enough for me. I am nothing if not a recovering people pleaser. This time around, though, I'm making some changes. I'm not gonna talk about it all in one go because last time that took me like 5 hours and it was torturous, and by the end I just wanted to die. This time around, I'm watching half of the season and talking about it, and then watching the other half and then talking about it. So halfway through this video, it's gonna be a completely different day. Don't be alarmed, I'm just doing it for my sanity. I'm gonna look a little different, okay? It's okay. If you didn't watch the season 1 video, you should probably watch it to catch up on what we're going to talk about next. But either way, I'll give a quick little recap of our characters. We've got Eric and Annie, who are the mom and dad of this family. Eric is a reverend, a minister of a local church. Annie is a stay-at-home mother of 5 children, and she does a kick-ass job at it. I love Annie still. I love her. I think she is a great example of a good mother in television, and I think she's pretty cool. Next up, we've got the oldest son. His name is Matt. He's 17 years old. Matt is infamous for getting in trouble all the time and pretty much never doing anything wrong, actually. He just gets caught up in trouble, unfortunately. The poor guy. But Matt is the best, and I love him. He's my favorite character. Annie is a very close second. Next up, we've got Mary, who's the oldest daughter in the family. She's on the varsity basketball team. But last season, in the very last couple episodes, she got hit by a car. She got hit and run, and she hurt her knee really bad, had to get surgery. And the cliffhanger was like, she may never be able to play basketball ever again. Oh no. I predicted she's gonna be fine. We'll find out if I'm right. The next kid is Lucy. In the last season, we've established Lucy is the most unhinged character in this show. They wrote her to be just wild. Someone in the comments mentioned that she was their favorite character, that it made her sad that nobody liked Lucy. You know what? You like Lucy. I love that for you. To be honest, I like Lucy too. She's just written to be insane. She's crazy. So far in this season, she's a little bit less unhinged. Still unhinged though. And in this season, she starts off at 14 years old. So we already had her 14th birthday. It's been a long time since the last season, I guess. Next, we've got Simon, who's probably 11 or 12 in this season. And then Ruthie is the youngest kid, who's 6, I believe. That's the family. Those are the kids. Let's get into freaking season 2! You guys, I'm so glad I did this. Season 2 beat out the crazy of season 1 in the first 5 episodes. I don't know if the writers just decided to embrace the fact that they're an unhinged Christian soap opera or what, but I love this season. All right, enough of my yapping about nonsense. We're gonna yap about episode 1 now. Start to the season opens up with Eric and a woman sitting in his office at church. This woman is named Nora, and she's talking about how her wedding anniversary is coming up. Eric cuts her off, starts making about himself.
How can I help you, Nora?
My wedding anniversary is coming up.
Mine too. Annie and I have been married 19 years.
That's nice.
Then we get a big drop of information from Nora that Eric was supposed to have known, but just forgot, slipped his mind somehow.
We would have been married 25 years.
I'm so sorry. I completely forgot.
Nora's husband is no longer living because 3 years ago, he was, can I say that on YouTube? He was murdered. And Nora makes it very clear that this person was a juvenile.
The boy who killed my husband is in a juvenile detention facility. He's a juvenile.
And Nora really wants to talk to the kid who ended her husband, but he wants nothing to do with her. He has not responded to any of her attempts to reach out. She's reached out to all the people who are in charge of him. She's talked to people in the government to see if they can schedule a meeting with her and him, and he's turned down every attempt. Not only that, though, she has written him a letter every single week for the last 3 years.
He's never responded.
Nora is just not taking no for an answer. Understandably, she wants answers. Her last-ditch effort to get a conversation with this kid is to get Eric to talk to him, because Eric, if you haven't already heard, he has been gifted with magical powers from God to be able to convince people to do things they would not do otherwise, to quite an extreme amount, actually. So it makes sense she went to Eric. The man has a gift. Eric reacts to all this in a very interesting way. It's not really clear why he does this. Maybe he's just so grateful that Annie is still alive, but he runs home and proposes to Annie.
Will you marry me?
Even though they're already married for 19 years, but he proposes to her, and then they decide to do another wedding for themselves in like 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know why, but that's how we're starting off this episode. All right, very intense and a little bit silly. And this theme of being a little bit silly is going to continue throughout this season, and I am a fan. I'm here for it. I love the silly. I love it. The storyline of the wedding is really interesting because we get some backstory, we get some lore about Annie. I guess for her first wedding, she wanted to wear her mother's wedding dress, but she wasn't able to because her father wouldn't let her or something like that. So she ended up wearing a hippy-dippy wedding dress.
You can wear that kind of hippy-dippy wedding dress you wore the first time. I love that dress.
Annie wants to get tuxes for the boys. Ruthie overhears this and decides she wants a tux too.
Do I get a tuxedo too?
I'm going to make you a beautiful dress, and you can be the flower girl.
Why can't I throw flowers in a tuxedo?
And you want to know what? She gets a tux. Ruthie wears a tux to the wedding and it's so cute. It's so cute. What the heck? I love that. I love that they didn't force her into some ridiculous gender norm. They totally let her wear a tux. It's adorable. I love it. I'm getting too excited already. I don't know. Something about season 2, you guys. It's just so good. We get some more lore about the wedding that's never explained. I'm still confused. I thought maybe they'd elaborate. I even looked it up online to try and figure out what the answer to this question is. Nothing. I found nothing. I don't know what the actual lore is, but apparently Annie and Eric's first wedding got called off because her parents were against it, I guess. Like, Annie's dad writes her a letter and tells her he's sorry for making her call off her first wedding.
I should never have let 19 years go by without apologizing for everything we did to make you call off the first wedding.
But they don't explain like what happened. There's no why. There's no explanation as to like how they actually ended up getting married, because they're married. It's not like they didn't get married, but they did call off their wedding. But then Annie talks about how it took them months to plan their first wedding, and now they only have weeks to plan this one, so she's really stressed. But it's like, well, if you planned your first wedding, you must have had a wedding, but then your dad made you call off the wedding. So did you elope, or did you have a wedding? Did you have one wedding fall through and then you planned another wedding and then got married? I don't understand. What happened? What's the deal with the wedding? This is important. I need to know. No answers. Just Annie's dad did not want her to get married. But this time around, this wedding, he's in full support. And he ended up sending Annie's mom's wedding dress to her so she could wear it for her second wedding, third wedding, first wedding? This wedding. During all of this chaos and wedding planning, we still have to talk to the kid who's in juvie, and Eric does that. He goes to the juvenile detention center and he talks to the kid. I don't recall them ever saying his name, so I'm gonna call him the juvie kid. Sorry if that's insensitive. I don't know what else to call him.
What's his name?
I've written it all down for you.
Eric goes and talks to this kid. He has no remorse.
And I suppose you're gonna try to tell me that doesn't bother you?
He does not care at all. Full on sociopathic level. He like opened the first letter and never opened any of the other letters that he sent her every week for 3 years. He just has them in a garbage bag, spills them out in front of Eric like, yeah. No, I'm not talking to that bitch. See how much I care? I don't give a care. He's not just sociopathic, he's extremely cruel as well. Eric brings up that Nora just wants some closure and wants to talk to him. He literally says,
I gave her the ultimate closure, man. I killed her husband.
that's a crazy thing to say. That's a crazy thing to say. Crazier though, he even threatens to pay her a visit.
Maybe I'll pay her a visit when I get out.
Yeah. Okay, Eric, you should probably tell his whoever's in charge of him. You should tell him that he said that. That's not okay. Eric should have left at this point, gone back to Nora and said, this kid's crazy. He's a sociopath. He's not right in the head. And that's all the closure you're probably going to get. And it's unfortunate, but you should probably not talk to him because he'll probably hurt you. He'll probably say something mean or something. Additional things that Juvie Kid says, he explains that he had a horrible life. He had no father, so raised by a single mother. That's the first bad single mother we see in this season. In season 2, we are still coming for single moms, and we are going to come even harder than we did before. That did not come out the way I intended, but that's what she said. Single moms are hot. What can I say? That should be the new narrative. Anyway, Juvie Kid, raised by a single mother who was a terrible mother, and also he says,
And only a TV to raise me. All I learned from the TV was how to kill people.
so I guess crime shows raised him, and instead of, idolizing the cops, he idolized the criminals. Very cool, very cool. This kid is a little brat. Nora should absolutely not go visit him. The kid ends up randomly deciding a little bit later that he actually does want to talk to Nora. I don't know why. He did, though. And Nora just wants to know what even happened to her husband, because apparently after 3 years, she still doesn't know. So he explains that he didn't want to end anybody. He just went into the store and her husband got in the way of his knife.
Look, I had a knife. The guy got in my way.
She tries talking some more remorse into him, and then we finally learn from the kid that her husband came into contact with the knife because he was protecting someone else in the store.
He got in between me and the manager guy.
I still don't understand what happened. I also don't understand why she never knew what happened to her husband, because they say that he died a hero.
At least I know he was protecting someone when he died. That's something. My husband died a hero. I never knew that.
So there's a witness who lived to tell the tale, yet still Nora has no idea what happened or why her husband died? This show, Anyway, she forgives the kid, she says her piece, and feels satisfied with their meeting. But the kid gets super mad at her for forgiving him. He's just angry and finally expressing some sort of emotion, so maybe not actually a sociopath, I don't know. And then Eric talks to him again. Finally, something breaks through this kid. He starts feeling a bit panicked and remorseful about his actions, which, if anyone can do it, it's Eric.
Do you think God will forgive me?
You better pray he does. I'm not sure I ever will.
There's a couple other details we need to learn about the other characters just to kind of catch up on how they've been doing the last few months. Matt cut his hair, which is a crime. He should also be in juvie for that. He still looks great, but still, crime. It's a crime. And even Annie agrees with me on that one.
See, it's Matt's new look. The short hair, much better for a tux.
I don't know, I kind of liked it better longer.
Matt is still dating Heather, and he's learned a lot of sign language, which is super cool. Heather's about to leave California to go to Pennsylvania for school, so Heather and Matt are spending every possible second they can together before she leaves. And they're so cute together. I love them. I love them.
What do you want to do tonight?
Stare at your face.
Heather's my favorite. I love her. Mary and Wilson, the boy toy single dad man, they are still together and kind of in a rocky place because Mary is struggling with the repercussions of her injury. Understandably, she's going through some emotional stuff. She doesn't know what to do with herself. She doesn't know how to work through her pain. She doesn't want to go to physical therapy. She's losing her hope in playing basketball again. But Wilson is just being really encouraging and trying to convince her that she should do her physical therapy to meet her goals of being able to go back to basketball. He's just trying to help. He's just trying to be supportive. Mary's pushing him away. They work through it though. Now it's time to catch up on Lucy. I didn't mention this in my last video about season 1 because it didn't seem that important. Like, I wrote about it in my notes, but I was like, well, I'm not going to talk about this show again. So here's what happened at the end of season 1. Simon convinces Lucy that she would be more attractive if she was blonde. They find some hair dye in a Cosmopolitan magazine and she dyes her hair. And it just looks like, blonde highlights. It looks fine, but everyone's like, oh no, like everyone's acting like it's the ugliest, most horrible thing they've ever seen, and I'm like, it's not that bad. It really wasn't a big deal.
When you see Lucy, tell her she never looked better. I'm a dead man.
But Jimmy Moon, Lucy's boyfriend from last season, he did not like her hair.
What happened to your hair?
He didn't like it so much so that he broke up with her.
It's not that big of a deal. It'll wash out.
Call me when it does.
What?
Call me when you've come to your senses.
Jimmy Moon's all like, I only like brunettes, so this is over.
I thought you liked impulsive women.
Impulsive brunettes.
But also, like, if you hate it, if everyone hates it, if your boyfriend's gonna break up with you over it,
Why did you let me do this?
just like dye it back to brown? You didn't want to be blonde. Make it brown again. It's still blonde in this season, so we're going with it. Lucy also invites Jimmy Moon to come to the wedding, and he's like, okay, cool, so that means I can bring my new girlfriend Ashley with me, right?
Yeah, of course.
That's incredibly mature of you.
Yeah, well, I matured a lot over the summer.
Later, Lucy changes her mind. She calls him back and is like, no, actually, do not come to the wedding, please. I do not want to see you with your new girlfriend. I'm not as mature as you thought. The wedding happens. It's good. And that's the end of the episode. Episode 2, first day of school. First day of school. This is a very special first day of school because Ruthie is going to school now.
Ruthie at school for the whole day? That means we have the whole day
Not to mention the whole house.
to ourselves.
Lucy not doing okay.
I'm having a complete nervous breakdown and you're calling it jitters? What if I run into Jimmy Moon and Ashley? It's school. We're all going down. Life's hell. Heck, life's heck.
Lucy is not okay. It's just her luck. When she shows up at school, her locker is right next to Ashley's locker, Jimmy Moon's new girlfriend.
What a curious coincidence that my new girlfriend has the locker right next to my old.
Not a good day for Lucy. Also, Ashley is played by a young Mila Kunis.
Still can't open your lock?
At first, when I saw this, though, I got really excited because I started making up my own plot in my head, how I would have written this storyline. What I would have loved to see happen is Lucy and Ashley, since they have lockers right next to each other, that they actually start becoming super good friends, and then they both turn on Jimmy Moon. Oh, like, wouldn't that be so epic if she became friends with Mila Kunis and they turned on Jimmy Moon? Ah! That would be so cool. No, it mostly is just really unfortunate for Lucy that she has to see Jimmy Moon with his new girlfriend every single day. So Lucy's super depressed about that all day, but then later she learns that Ashley slipped in the lunchroom and mooned everybody with her Pocahontas underwear. That is the exact way that is phrased by a teacher who tells this to Lucy.
You know that girl Ashley something who has that locker next to you? Someone dropped a plate of spaghetti in the lunchroom and she slipped and slid right across the floor and mooned the entire chess club with her Pocahontas underwear.
And that makes her pretty happy. So I guess God doesn't hate her after all. Another tiny part of this episode, all the kids get in trouble for really stupid rules, like Mary has an aspirin at school and that gets her in trouble.
No drugs, illegal or legal, prescription or non-prescription.
Ruthie gets in trouble for wearing a hat.
No hats worn backwards. We have that rule because gang members wear their hats backwards.
Matt gets in trouble because he wore his jacket that his dad borrows all the time, and his dad's beeper was in the jacket and went off in school in the hallway of all places, like not even in class disrupting anything, just in the hallway. And Matt has this new teacher who's a total asshole, and this teacher gets him in trouble for even having a beeper at school, even though it's his dad's, and it didn't disrupt class, it was just in the hallway, but still, Matt goes down to the principal's office for that.
I could have sworn that the school handbook listed beepers as drug paraphernalia.
We'll talk about that asshole teacher because he does end up coming back later. Simon also gets in trouble because he brought chicken in his lunchbox and his mom packed a knife for him to cut the chicken with, and the teacher saw him with a knife, which is a weapon, so he got in trouble too. All the kids got in trouble on the first day of school. But that's not even the craziest part of this episode. I've been holding out on you. This episode is insane for this specific reason. This plotline is just one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Eric and Annie are super excited because they're finally getting a day off. All the kids are at school all day long. So Eric talks to his secretary at the church and is like, don't forward any calls for me. It's my day off. I'm not going to do any minister duties. I'm spending the day at home with my wife. We're going to just chill and, you know. Unfortunately, they get interrupted by the police calling them. Yeah. There is a boy in Lucy's class who is standing on the top of a building, threatening to jump off of the building. So the cops call Eric so he can use his superpowers to talk to this kid, literally talk him off the ledge. There were other reverends, you know, if you're gonna call a social worker or a minister, Eric's not the only one. But maybe his superpowers are a widely known thing in this universe, so of course the cops would call him. Eric, you're the only one who can talk this kid out of this decision. The kids who have been at school all day apparently know about this, and they also know that the cops called a superhero.
I think the cop was calling a superhero to help it, like Batman.
So for news to spread this fast. This must be a really small town in rural California. We learn a little bit more about the boy who's on the roof. His mom shows up, and we get our second terrible single mother of this season.
You can't be a mother and a father to a kid without him getting upset sometimes.
This kid's mom is portrayed as being very absent.
You actually think he's the type to jump off a building? He has had all morning. If he were going to do something drastic, he would have done it by now.
Being a terrible listener.
I had no idea he was this upset.
Being very unsuccessful in her parenting, because that is how we portray single moms in media.
I've had just about enough of this, young man. I want you to come down here right now.
Don't let her come up here.
She's a helicopter mom, and she will not let him do anything. And this is very apparent because the kid explains that he's up on the roof because he wants to be heard. He just wants someone to take him seriously, to listen to him for once. And also, he wanted to ditch school. The reason he wanted to ditch school is because of his pants. All of this is because of his pants.
You never listened to me. Told you. Can't wear this pants to school.
I mean, more so, the principle that his mother doesn't listen to him, but it's because he has the wrong pants.
I was never done a jump. Just came up here to ditch. Would you go to school looking like I do?
I'm not quite following.
Take a look, man. Are you blind? These are hunky boy jeans. I asked for baggy pants, and the woman tries to send me to school in hunky boys.
So we threatened to jump off a building. What is this show? This is so unhinged. This is so unhinged. Eric obviously helps out. The mom finally listens. Everything's resolved. Eric tells everyone, he spreads the story that the kid was actually on the roof because he was stopping a robbery. That's the rumor that Eric decides to spread so that the kids at school and the neighborhood all think that he's a hero.
Like Batman.
Not a little whiny boy who had the wrong pants. Very nice. Okay. Episode 3. This one I titled the I Love You episode. And then I checked the actual name of this episode, and it's called I Love You. So I titled it the same way they did. I guess I am pretty creative. This episode starts off with a beautiful example of healthy, gentle parenting from Annie.
I don't want to go with you any more than you want to take me.
If I sounded cranky, I apologize. If you could never use that tone of voice again with me, I'd be ecstatic.
Sorry, Mom.
I love you, Lucy.
Love it. Love seeing gentle parenting portrayed in the 90s. I'm a fan. This is very important because there's a juxtaposition here with some good parenting and some really bad parenting. Almost comically bad parenting. And guess by who? A single mother. Yeah. I'm not even kidding. That's 3 episodes in a row with a terrible single mother in it. What's going on here? Anyway, this is how the story goes. Lucy has an assignment to learn how to shop at the grocery store on a budget. So she's at the grocery store with her mom when they see another girl Lucy's age at the grocery store with her mom. It's not going so good.
If you weren't so stupid, then you would have done this on your own before I came home.
This classmate, her name is Lori, and her mom is business mom, single mom.
Do you ever consider how hard I work?
And she's very overwhelmed and stressed out.
I'm Carol, a person with a job who's had a long, hard day, who's a little irritated right now and doesn't really have time for all this.
Annie and Lucy talk to them and end up befriending this girl, Lori, and her mom, and they offer to help Lori with the shopping assignment so that her mom can go do work. They even offer to let Lori come over for a sleepover that night. Lori's mom is all over this idea. She's like, yes, please get this kid off my hands. I don't want to deal with this right now. And because they're doing a sleepover, Eric needs to go over to Lori's house to pick up some clothes, jammies, toothbrush, all that for her. And Annie mentions to Eric before he goes that she's really concerned that Lori's mother might be a little bit abusive. Tells him that he should absolutely snoop around because that's his job. That's what he does best. Snooping all day long. So Eric goes and snoops. He sees the grandmother interact with the mother.
At the supermarket.
What the hell are you doing opening the door to a stranger? You're such an idiot sometimes. It's a wonder you don't get us all killed.
This is definitely a pattern. This is not just mom having an issue, okay? And Lori, when she's spending all day with the Camdens, she is in awe that they say I love you to each other. She's flabbergasted. She has never once in her entire life been told I love you by somebody, by anybody.
What's wrong? No one has ever said I love you to me before.
How are we gonna resolve this years-long cycle of abuse? Eric has an idea. He tells Lori that she should tell her mom first, I love you, and not expect her to say it back. Just get the ball rolling. Just kind of get the idea out there. Well, Lori does end up telling her mom that she loves her, and her heart softens up, and her mom says, I love you back. So all the problems in that family have been fixed. I'm sure of it. The other plot of this episode is about Matt and Heather and Simon and Ruthie. Simon and Ruthie keep reading Matt's letters that he's writing to Heather when she's away at school. They're analyzing it. They're treating it like it's a soap opera of their own.
It says, to my beautiful, darling Heather.
They are living vicariously through Matt's love life. Matt accidentally ends up leaving one of his letters on his dad's desk, and his dad accidentally starts reading it. And the first line is, Dear Mrs. Matt Camden. So Eric is freaking out, and he goes to Annie and he's like, I didn't read the whole thing, but I saw this. I think that Matt and Heather got freaking married without telling us. And Annie's like, what? I'm not gonna violate Matt's privacy. I'm not gonna read it, but you can read the whole letter to me if you want. So Eric reads the whole letter, and it's very flowery, and essentially is like, I can't bear to keep this secret much longer. I'm so excited to one day tell the world that you're my wife. The implication here being that Matt and Heather are in fact secretly married. Eric and Annie are freaking out. They call Heather's mom. She comes over to the house. They show her the letter. She's freaking out now. Everyone's freaking out. When Matt finally comes home, he explains to them that it was a prank on Simon and Ruthie because they keep reading his letters. He pranked them to think that he and Heather were in fact married. And everyone believed it without talking to Matt first. So that's fun. That's really fun. But the whole idea behind this plot line is that saying I love you to someone is a really big deal. We learned that Eric didn't even tell Annie that he loved her until after they were already married.
How long were you and Dad together before he said it to you?
Oh, about a year.
Not till after we were married.
Mary gets all obsessed with this and goes to Wilson and tries to get Wilson to say that he loves her, and he doesn't because he doesn't feel ready to say that yet because they've only been dating a few months. And he also feels that saying I love you is a commitment as deep as marriage.
Saying I love you is a commitment, and we're too young and we haven't known each other long enough to make a commitment.
Yeah, if you say I love you to anyone in this universe, you want to marry them. That's a definitive fact. So that's episode 3 for you. Episode 4, it's another pot episode, baby. Oh yeah, you thought we weren't gonna have any more pot episodes? You were wrong. This one is far more unhinged than the last. I'm gonna get to the smaller plots first before we get to the pot stuff. Just to, give you some suspense, because it's pretty good. Ruthie states that her mother has told her she's allowed to wear whatever she wants.
You can't wear your bathing suit to dinner. Why not? Mom says I can dress myself any way I want to.
More points for Annie. What a great mom. She's such a good mom. That was just a side note, though. That's not really that important to the story. Lucy starts going out with this guy named Rod, which I think Rod is just a pivotal, important part of this specific episode. I haven't seen him since this episode, so I think he disappeared. He's lost somewhere in the continuity void. Lucy starts off this plot line by saying she's not allowed to date.
Mom, since I'm not allowed to date yet, I was wondering if it would be okay if I would invite Rod over for dinner.
Which doesn't make sense to me because she's 14 now, and Mary was allowed to date when she was 14 in the last season, and also in the last season, Lucy was 12 and she went on dates. So I don't know where she's getting this idea that she's not allowed to date. Maybe it was decided after the fact when her parents realized that she's crazy. That's what I'm gonna say. That's the only way that it makes sense. But Lucy met this new boy, Rod, and she's acting super weird to impress him. Like, she does her hair all weird. It's not that weird, but the family thinks it's weird.
This guy is the reason that you're dressing so differently.
Maybe.
And she puts on some heavy makeup, so she's looking a little more edgy. We learn that Rod drives a moped, so he's pretty cool. And we meet Rod, and he is the most eccentric character I think we've seen on this show so far. I don't know how to describe him, except he's like a biker surfer dude.
Hi, Rod.
Hey, babe.
He's a vegetarian.
The salad was awesome.
And he's very awkward. There's a part where Mary and Wilson are kind of interrogating him, and he's just so...
So, how old are you anyway? 14. How long did it take you to grow the mustache? 14 years.
different. Just, you know, really being himself. And I love that for him.
Nice scooter. Moped. So what did you have before that?
Okay, so we got to talk about pot now. In the beginning of this episode, a random guy at school invites Matt to go to a party. Matt declines, and then the guy just like hands him a joint. He's like, yeah, well, since you can't come to the party and I know you really miss your girlfriend Heather, here's this, a pick me up. And he just hands it to him in the middle of a school hallway. That's not how drug deals happen, but it is for Matt because this is Matt's life and he is a magnet for trouble he did not want. So this kid just gives Matt a joint, doesn't know what to do with it, so he puts it in the front pocket of his shirt. When he gets home, he leans down and pets the dog Happy. The joint falls out of his pocket onto the floor, still untouched by him, by the way. There was no indication that he was going to do anything with it that we're aware of. He just had it by the universe blessing him with another crazy conflict. The joint falls out of his pocket in front of the dog, and the dog picks it up without Matt seeing, and it sits in her mouth like she's smoking it. It's kind of cute, I'm not gonna lie. Oh my god. Anyway, a little while later, Eric is petting the dog, and Happy just spits the joint out onto the floor. Who knows how long it's been in her mouth, but it is still perfectly crisp, completely intact and dry. Well, Eric sees this joint and the hunt begins. Immediately, Eric thinks this is Matt's and he goes to Annie, and Annie's like, well, we shouldn't accuse anybody. We don't know where this came from. They decide to hold on to the joint. They put it in Annie's nightstand. A little bit later, Mary and Lucy are going through the room. They go through Mom's nightstand and they find the joint. At first, they're like, are our parents doing drugs? And then they think about it for a second and they go, no, that doesn't make sense. Just our mom is doing drugs.
You know, it might just be Mom. And if only one of the two of them were smoking, it would have to be her.
I mean, it must be tough playing a minister's wife all the time.
No wonder Mom always seems so happy. That's probably why she's always in the kitchen baking something.
Then Eric thinks that maybe Lucy had the joint and it came from her new boy toy, Rod. So Eric asks Rod if he's ever smoked pot, and his answer is really weird, as usual.
I would never smoke pot. I hear it lowers your sperm count.
Goodbye, son.
And at this point in the little witch hunt that's going on, Annie admits something to Eric she has never told him before.
The summer before I went off to college, I did a little experimenting myself.
When she was a kid, about Matt's age, she used to smoke pot. And because of that, she thinks Eric should really take it easier on the kids, just in case one of them actually is smoking pot. But upon learning this information, Eric is a little bit pissed off. He's angry at Annie for never telling him this monumental, super important, life-altering piece of information.
Were you never tempted to do it?
Frankly, I never got the appeal.
Then we get Wilson's perspective on the situation. Wilson talks about how he made a mistake when he became a single father.
Some mistakes are like jumping out of a plane. Once you do it, you can never take it back. It stays with you forever.
I think it's implying this is like what pot was for Annie, like a horrible mistake you can never take back, which I think having a kid and smoking some pot, very, very different in my opinion. But in this show, it's the exact same thing. Just so we're clear on the morals of this show. Annie goes up to Matt and talks to him about how she used to smoke pot and tells him the full story. She used to smoke with her old friend Rachel. We met Rachel in season 1. She was the pedo. We don't like Rachel. Anyway, Rachel got Annie into pot, and she and Rachel's boyfriend would smoke all the time together. And one night, Rachel's boyfriend left after getting zooted, just extremely zooted. And at the very last stoplight before he got home, something happened, unclear. He got launched out of his windshield though, and he unfortunately passed away. As are the immediate consequences to sin, people. Okay, are you listening? But actually, that's really sad and very unfortunate that that happened to Annie and her friends. Annie also says that they were still just high out of their minds when they got a phone call that their friend had died, and they went over to the crime scene high out of their minds to witness a traumatic event. That was a decision that Annie made that obviously traumatized her, and she never touched pot again. Well, Matt is a little bit offended by this because Annie coming and telling him this story is kind of assuming that he's the one that had the joint. Matt doesn't like being accused of something without even being asked if he did it. So Matt's starting to get a little bit frustrated.
It's funny. Sounds like I'm already guilty.
A little bit later, there's a family meeting, a little powwow at the end of the day, and the parents are like, okay, we've got to figure this out once and for all. We found a joint. Whose joint is this? Who's doing the weed? Matt comes forward and admits that it was his, but before he gets the chance to explain himself, Eric goes on an angry tirade, gets very angry at Matt.
Because, hey, here's something that doesn't take a whole lot of skill to do, just a lighter and a complete lack of self-respect.
It's not why
I'm not finished!
Matt decides he's gonna leave, and he meets up with the party boys who gave him the weed in the first place. He hops in a car with them, and it seems like, uh-oh, he's gonna repeat the past. They're gonna get in a car accident and someone's gonna die. But no, Matt comes to his senses. He tells the kids, stop the car, and he gets out of the car and he starts walking. He wanders around, finds himself at his father's church. His father is so angry at him, it almost seems like their relationship is never going to be the same. So Matt, instead of trying to explain himself to his parents, he's explaining himself in private to God. He's telling God how he never even touched pot. He didn't smoke it. He didn't know what to do with it. He just had it and it was an accident. It was a mistake. And now he's never going to be forgiven. His parents are never going to love him anymore. Luckily though, Eric and Annie decided to go out and look, and they ended up showing up at the church, and they found Matt there and overheard his prayer, and so they immediately embrace him and forgive him and say they're sorry and everything's okay. All of this drama. This guy has the absolute worst case of oldest sibling syndrome I have ever seen. Crazy. It's all over the place. It's crazy, but we did it. We got through that. We can talk about the heavy, hard-hitting topics on this show. And speaking of heavy, hard-hitting topics, this episode 5, is this one I titled the cult episode. I have a lot of interest in cults, being a survivor of one. So this episode was really, really silly and interesting for me to watch.
Can I ask you something?
You can always ask.
How does a guy get 38 people to kill themselves so they can get on a UFO with him?
In this time frame, the Jonestown massacre has recently happened. It's all over the news, and Simon is super curious about it. He's just fascinated.
When you're with a group of people who believe something very strongly, you can be influenced by that, and then you start to believe what they believe.
He asks Eric some very good, hard-hitting questions about this.
Oh, so it's kind of like church.
No. It's not kind of like church.
Sure about that one, Eric? You sure about that one?
When people keep telling you something over and over again, you start to think something's wrong with you if you don't believe it too.
Oh, so just you're right there. You're right there.
So it's kind of like church.
So Eric decides to educate Simon about cults by telling him to start his own cult, learning by practice, I suppose. So Eric starts teaching Simon how to emotionally manipulate people.
Subtly insist that you're shrinking. You could eventually get the other kids to believe it.
Interesting idea, Eric. Let's teach children how to weaponize emotional manipulation when they're very young.
Yeah, cool. Charismatic. That's me. I'm pretty sure.
That's an idea. For sure. So the whole thing Eric tells Simon to do is to get Ruthie on his side to help him convince everyone that he's shrinking, and that way Simon can see how cults work. So Simon gets Ruthie in on it, and they try and trick Matt and try and convince him that he's shrinking. And Ruthie keeps saying throughout this that Simon needs to go to the doctor as part of her way of convincing him, part of her way of being, you know, a loyal cult member.
You need to see a doctor. You need to see a doctor. You need to see a doctor.
Well, Matt catches on to what they're doing, and he plays along and starts believing that Simon has shrunk.
We did it! Matt's in our cult!
And because Matt took it so seriously, Simon starts believing also. He's freaking out. He's like, oh my gosh, no, actually, wait, I am shrinking and I believe it for real. And he ends up actually going to the doctor, where he learns that he has in fact grown and that he's perfectly fine. I'm very glad the doctor did not charge them for checking his height.
I'm an inch and a half taller. Did she charge you?
No.
At least there's a little bit of decency in the medical world of price gouging. Simon gets back at Matt by trying to convince him that he's balding.
I thought your hair looked different in the back, but it doesn't.
It looks like I'm losing my hair.
Well, not like Grandpa.
Very fun cult.
You're playing with my head again, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, you got me. Hair looks great.
You're getting there. It's not quite what a cult is, but you know, it's all right. I'll give it to you. It's pretty close. There's two other storylines in this episode. One is the most horrible, terrible thing, and the other one's hilarious. So let's do the good news first. Let's do the bad news first. Bad news first is better, right? There is just a horrible, terrible plot line in this episode where there is a girl at school who's spreading rumors about another girl. Everyone thinks that this other girl has an eating disorder, the kind where you go to the bathroom after eating and cause the food to exit your body. Rumors are spreading about this girl, and Lucy decides she wants to try and confirm this rumor by inviting this girl over for dinner to see if she goes to the bathroom to let her food out. What the fuck? This is awful. We learn the truth of the matter is that this girl goes to the bathroom after eating every time she eats because she's brushing her braces. And she's super skinny because she's poor and starving.
I'm hungry.
You don't have enough to eat?
Sometimes, but you know, it's okay.
What the fuck? What? Annie figures this out by talking to the girl, and while she's talking to her, this girl explains that she actually would prefer that everyone thinks she has an eating disorder.
You know, it's okay that you think I have an eating disorder. It's less embarrassing than the truth.
It also turns out that this girl knew the reasons why Lucy had invited her over for dinner, and she went anyway to get free food.
I figured whatever you were having for dinner would be better than what we were having, and I'm really sorry that I used them.
But as they get to know each other, Lucy actually thinks this girl is super cool and decides that she wants to be her friend. So I guess that's good. Here's the good news. Here's the happy plotline. This one is so silly, just so silly. Throughout this season, Eric is getting progressively sillier and sillier, and I like it a lot. I'm starting to really like Eric. I think he's super funny. They gave him a lot more personality in this season. We get a return of Mrs. Bink and Mrs. Hinkle from season 1. Mrs. Bink is the lady who fibs all the time to further the plot, and also she's probably not all there in the noggin. Whereas Mrs. Hinkle is the organist lady who pretended to be terrible at playing the organ so she would get fired because she thought that if she just quit that she would go to hell. And that's who we're working with here. We learn in this episode that these two are best friends, but Mrs. Hinkle has recently moved out of her house that her husband built from the ground up. She's moving out of her house and selling it so that she can move into a home. Well, Mrs. Bink is utterly shocked by this decision made by Mrs. Hinkle, and she goes full-blown conspiracy theorist. She thinks that Mrs. Hinkle's children have forced this narrative and forced Mrs. Hinkle to lie about her reasoning and move into the nursing home against her will.
I've read about these places. She'll probably be in restraints, drugged up, and eating some kind of dog food.
So she gets Eric involved. They show up to the nursing home asking to see Mrs. Hinkle, and the guy there is like, nope, she's asked for nobody to visit her. She does not want to be disturbed, furthering the idea that there is actually some conspiracy being run by Mrs. Hinkle's children. Finally, after many attempts, Eric and Mrs. Bink end up actually being able to go visit Mrs. Hinkle at the nursing home, and she talks about how she chose to be there of her own volition because she didn't feel safe in her house all alone. She seems to be actually perfectly content.
My refrigerator makes ice.
But Mrs. Bink is not happy about this. She is still just so upset that Mrs. Hinkle went to a home.
You get a big dog or a big boyfriend, but you don't sell your house.
You don't. I do.
She's not letting this go.
I know you're not telling us the whole story about this move, and you know what? I don't like it, any of it.
They end up investigating, going to the house where Mrs. Hinkle's children are permanently stationed throughout the episode, dressed up all nice to sell the house, I guess. And when they talk to them, their responses to the questions seem rehearsed and a little bit off.
The house and the lawn are too big for her to maintain by herself.
Plus, she's starting to feel vulnerable.
And so Eric starts snooping a little bit more. He goes back to Mrs. Hinkle and is like, seems like your kids said the exact same thing you did, almost word for word, to the point where it seemed like a script. What's going on, Mrs. Hinkle? Tell me the truth.
Try and be subtle with what we suspect.
I can handle that. You are such a liar. Subtle never really worked for me.
The truth is just the weirdest. Just the weirdest thing I've ever heard. It's so silly. It's so funny. Mrs. Hinkle says that she was a terrible mother and she did not raise her children to be able to take care of themselves. So now they are full grown adult losers. She was so fed up with her children being little baby bitches that could not take care of themselves that she decided to sell her house so that they would stop running home to mommy. So they wouldn't have a place to run when they have troubles. Well, after talking to Eric and Mrs. Bink a little bit more, Mrs. Hinkle comes to her senses and decides, you know what? No, I'm not gonna sell my house that's currently being listed on the market, prepped to sell. She goes and talks to her children, tells them off, and decides she's staying in that house. Me in the future, I forgot to mention this. I found it really funny in this episode that Eric's whole job as a minister that day was just entertaining the woes of old people. At least in my experience, I feel like that's pretty accurate when you're doing any kind of like ministerial service. The majority of your time you're going to be spent with old people. Maybe that's just me, but I thought that was hilarious. And that's episode 5. Episode 6 is actually super sad. This is the breakup episode. Heather wrote a letter to Matt saying that she found someone else and that she no longer wants to date Matt. Matt is really devastated because he wanted to marry Heather, like he's super in love with her. He ends up borrowing money from all his siblings, mostly Simon, who has a ton of savings. And side note, this is super cute. Simon ends up becoming like the bank of the siblings moving forward. He lends out his money to them and they'll pay him back with interest and stuff. It's super cute. Anyway, Matt borrows this money to travel out to Pennsylvania to see Heather. He takes buses, which apparently is a 3-day trip, just to talk to her in person. And Heather explains that the guy she's now with is deaf, so he knows more about the deaf community. He understands her better. They relate to each other better. And she just feels really right about dating him, even though she really cares about Matt. So the breakup is final. It's official. That trip all the way out to Pennsylvania was for nothing. Understandably, you just got broken up with Matt. Traveling across the country is not going to change that. The poor guy. Oh, it's just so sad. I really liked Heather. I really liked her. She was my favorite girl that Matt dated throughout the whole series so far, so it's kind of a bummer that she's gonzo. The other part of this episode is that Mary and Wilson are constantly making out. They are kissing so much and it's really loud and sloppy and gross. Ew. I hate that noise. I hate the squishy noise of kissing. But they end up breaking up because of kissing. Their breakup is super weird and does not make any sense at all. Wilson essentially believes that he is a terrible person, that he is a bad guy because he had sex before and now he has a kid.
Well, maybe it might be nice to go out with somebody a little bit bad.
I am a bad guy, Mary. I've got a kid to prove it.
And he is desperately trying to avoid having sex again, and so he breaks up with Mary.
I've proven that I can have sex. Now I just like to prove that I cannot have sex.
Even though Mary's like, we're just kissing and it's not going further and I don't want to go further, I don't want to have sex, but Wilson still is adamant that he just wants to break up, and so Mary's like, okay, whatever. Which honestly, that probably is a really good thing for Wilson because he was spending a lot of time at their house when he has a very young child, supposedly, at home that's never with him, so I don't know who watches his kid when he's making out with Mary all the time. Maybe making out less is a very good thing because he will actually be with his child. That should have been his reasoning for breaking up with her, I think. Episode 7.
It's the whole mall experience. The neon, the blinking lights, the air. It smells like shopping.
Lucy loves the mall.
When I die, I want my ashes to be sprinkled from level 8, and that way part of me will be part of the mall forever.
Lucy goes to the mall with her friends, and they change out of their normal clothes, and they absolutely girl boss at the mall. They go shopping, they get fancy things, and they walk around, they strut their stuff, those little 14-year-old girls, and they start talking to a mall cop who starts flirting with them.
But I'm afraid you ladies are gonna need my professional services.
Why is that?
Because anybody who looks as lovely as you ladies do must need protecting.
Extremely unprofessional mall cop. Mary and Annie end up going to the mall to pick up Lucy a little bit early, and she gets caught all, dressed up. Yeah, she gets in a lot of trouble for dressing a little bit above her age. I think we should be getting more angry at the creepy mall cop than at Lucy for dressing up. But yeah, let's shame Lucy for trying to express herself and experiment with her style. Okay. Even though we don't shame Ruthie for experimenting with her style, we will shame Lucy. There's a part of this episode where the parents ask Ruthie what she's doing that day.
What are you up to today?
I don't know. I like to keep my Saturdays open in case Mary and Lucy want to hang out and catch up.
It's so cute. She's also, throughout this episode, completely obsessed with understanding how fast 100 miles per hour is.
How fast is 100 miles an hour? How fast is 100 miles an hour? How fast is 100 miles an hour? Is it like this?
Yes.
Yes. That's what I thought.
Also in this episode, Simon made a new friend named Stan. Stan has an older sister named Karen. Matt meets Karen and asks her about her belt, which has a bee kind of insignia on it. He goes, "Oh, hey, what's that for?" And she goes,
My nickname, Baby Doll. Almost everybody calls me that.
"Baby doll." That's what everyone calls me, is Baby doll. Oh dear God. But Stan and Baby Doll are acting really sketchy. So Matt investigates a little further and realizes that that bee symbol on Baby Doll's belt is actually a symbol of a gang. Matt tells his mom and dad, and Annie and Eric take it upon themselves to be involved in this business, as they do. They tell her parents. At first, they don't believe Eric at all. They're like, "No, not my darling child. She would never." But then they find a bunch of weapons that she stashed in Stan's bedroom. So then they believe that she's in a gang, and they confront her and talk to her about it, and she's like super naive. She's pretty indoctrinated by her gang. She believes that they're her friends and they wouldn't do anything to hurt her ever. But the parents are like, "No, we got to get you out of this. This is dangerous. Like, nuh-uh." And she says, "Just trust me. I'll talk to them. They'll let me go. I promise." They do let her try to quit the gang. And after that, there's a scene where Annie walks up to everybody just looking really sad. And it's like, wait, what? What? What happened? Is she dead? Did she die? What happened? But no, she just got beat up. She just got beat up real good. So she's in the hospital, still alive, a little bit bruised. And that is how the episode ends. That's the episode. Why? Why? Episode 8 starts with Annie giving away muffins at church on Sunday. And a guy in their congregation is like, "Oh my God, these muffins? They're so good, babe. The people would love your muffins, darling." So this guy offers Annie a job, essentially selling her muffins at his store. Initially, Annie says no. She's hesitant because she's like, "I have a full-time job. I'm a stay-at-home mom and I have 5 children. That's my job." But Mary and Lucy are kind of pushing her, and they think she absolutely should take the job to, meet her full potential, bringing in the big bucks. I think it's supposed to be a commentary on women in the workplace, and it's a little sketchy. It's a little sketchy, but I'm gonna let it slide because I do really like Annie, and I think it's handled very tactfully for being a sort of anti-feminist position. But in the way I view it, I think it actually still does qualify as feminism, depending on what lens you look through. But the whole thing is like, Annie has started working for this cookie businessman, and she's overworked. She's constantly making muffins, and she's making a lot of money from it, but she's overworked, and she's not able to spend as much time with her children as she wants. Eventually, Annie completely burns out, and she realizes that her one true job and her one true love is being in the home with her children. She gives a whole speech about it that's actually really beautiful. I think well done.
This is what I love to do. I love being a mom and running this house. I get to be a bookkeeper, a banker, a nurse, a carpenter, a psychologist, and I'm proud of it. I'm darn proud of it.
Which is why my feminism bones aren't super angry about it, because I do believe that stay-at-home moms are super important and should be part of the world.
I can't believe that I let you two sucker me into thinking that I needed to be validated by a big corporation in order to be important, and a male-owned corporation at that.
The problem is within Christianity, when feminism is demonized because it's taking women out of the home, and that's looked at as a very negative, evil, bad thing. When that's not the point. It was never the point. It was never to force women out of the home, but for some reason Christians think that that's what feminism is. So the point is, you shouldn't be forcing women to be in the place of a stay-at-home mom if that's not what they want. Don't just expect women to live that life. And that's why I really do like Annie's speech at the end, because she is an excellent mother and she is passionate. She loves being a stay-at-home mom. She loves being with her kids. And that to me is beautifully feminist, That's what she wants to do, and that's what she's enabled to do. I love that she gets to do that. I think that's something that a lot of people misunderstand about feminism. That's my opinion, okay? Also in episode 8, there's a family in Eric's congregation that has a kid who's super sick. He is dying. I don't know of what, probably cancer, but I don't think they specify. And the parents are asking Eric Eric if they know a young man who would be willing to work for them to sit with their kid in the hospital and read books with him and just spend time with them. Matt overhears this and talks to Eric and is like, hey, I would love to do that. I need a job. And Eric, for some weird reason, just is so against Matt doing this. His reasoning being it's really difficult to work with dying children. Like, it's too hard for you emotionally to do that, so I don't want you to take the job. Crazy. Well, Matt goes behind his dad's back and takes the job anyway. He starts working for the parents, and Eric just has to accept it. And Matt is actually super great with the kid. He reads his favorite comic books with him, and they have a great time together. They're buddies. While he's hanging out with this kid in the hospital, he mentions how his parents are really helicoptery controlling parents, and they're so scared of having something happen to him that they don't let him leave. He hasn't been outside. He hasn't seen the sun. He hasn't seen grass. This kid is suffering in a hospital bed. This kid tells Matt that he just wants to go play baseball or just go outside, get out of the hospital. And apparently he's talked to all the other people at the hospital about this too, like the nurses and doctors. But the parents have explicitly stated he cannot go outside of the hospital. He is not allowed to leave.
They probably figure they're buying him some extra time if they keep him under constant supervision.
Even though the doctors have said he'll be fine if he goes outside, like it's not gonna give him any complications, he's okay to leave the hospital, the parents are not having it.
Would anything happen to him if he weren't under constant supervision?
I think he'd be okay for a day out. In fact, I'm sure of it.
So Matt and this kid hatch a plan. He sneaks the kid out and they go to a baseball diamond. The kid is happier than he's been in months. The parents track him down. They find Matt and they find the kid and miraculously see the error of their ways. And they decide that they're not gonna have their kids stay at the hospital anymore. They let him come home and live with them, which if he could have been doing that the whole time, I do not understand why you would spend so much money keeping your kid in a hospital when the doctors have said it's not gonna make a difference, but these people are a little bit extra. Thank goodness for Matt, I guess. But in the end, Eric is so proud of Matt and how he handled working with this kid that he tells Matt he should work with dying children as a career. Full 180 on that one. Episode 9 starts off strong with tragedy. Simon has an assignment at school to do a historical presentation. He's supposed to ask a parent about what they were doing or what it was like during a certain historical event. And Simon, along with every other kid in his class, has decided that their assignment is going to be asking their parents where they were when JFK was assassinated.
Dad, you had to have been doing something when Kennedy was shot.
According to Simon, asking people where they were when JFK died is like
The world's greatest where were you when question, and I invented it.
It's been asked before, Simon.
Just wait until 2001, Simon. You're gonna be shook. Matt starts dating this girl named Joanne. According to Mary and Lucy, she's just perfect, a little too perfect, to the point where they think she's fake. So Mary and Lucy hate Joanne.
Hater.
Hater. Hater.
They just immediately have this unfounded vendetta against Joanne. And they are brutal. They are so hateful and so rude to her. There's a part where Joanne comes over for dinner and Mary and Lucy are in the kitchen talking shit about Joanne, which they've been doing for days at this point.
I won't be able to eat from the glare of her teeth flashing in my eyes. You think they're capped?
Bleached at the very least. And she's probably had a boob job and her nose fixed. Nobody can look that good without some serious help.
Even making fun of her for having to use a microwave regularly.
Oh, the poor thing. She usually eats by herself.
I'm just surprised you can microwave by yourself.
Good one.
They're so mean. While they're saying all this, Joanne overhears them and obviously gets super upset and ends up breaking up with Matt. Even though she really likes Matt, she's like, your sisters were so rude and I don't like them, and so we're not gonna date. Matt talks to them about it. They realize they were wrong. They go and apologize to Joanne, try and get Matt some points back because they feel really bad. Even after all that, she's like, no, I can never trust you again, and I'm not dating Matt again. So that relationship is over quick. Episode 10. Okay, you guys, I love this episode. This was my favorite episode of Seventh Heaven I have watched to date. It's called Truth or Dare, I believe, and it's so good. It's so cute and silly and fun and wholesome, and I just really liked it, okay? Eric is getting fat.
I was thinking maybe we should start taking walks together after dinner.
You think I'm fat?
I think you're a very attractive man.
Who's fat?
He's really concerned about it.
I'm holding a lot of water right now. Well, all the men in my family retain water.
It's super funny and goofy.
You're the most attractive man in the world.
Most attractive fat man in the world.
And the roasting of Eric in this episode is absolutely ruthless.
What do you say, Simon? You feel like going for a jog?
No thanks, Dad. I can get into my jeans and tuck a shirt in comfortably.
There's also parts where Eric is like asking Matt to sneak him some cheeseburgers.
I need some cheeseburgers.
I love Eric being silly.
Your mom doesn't have to know about this.
Why would you? They're just cheeseburgers.
Right. They're just cheeseburgers.
And this part in particular made me just giggle a little bit. It was so funny.
Oh, Dad, you don't have to live like this. You're not that fat.
What do you mean by that fat?
I'm on my way.
That's how we're starting off this episode, but it gets even better. We're gonna go through lots of fun stuff here. Mary has been single for a few weeks now, and she's feeling really lonely, and she wants someone new to hang out with. She wants a new boy toy, and she has her eyes set on Brian, okay?
Found him.
Found who?
Brian Keys. He's right over there.
Brian is the man for Mary. Brian happens to be loosely acquainted with Matt, so Mary asks Matt if he will tell Brian to ask her out. So he does. He goes over to Brian and he's like, hey, Mary's interested in you. You should take her out. Brian's immediately like, no way, dude. She is not my type. Matt ends up bribing him because he doesn't have money, so he's like, okay, if you take her out on a date, I'll give you the $20 to pay for the date. All right, just take her out so that she can get off my back. And I had a hunch, I had a feeling early on this was going to be our fanfic plotline where the guy asks this girl out on a bet, you know, and then he actually likes her and they actually fall in love, but then there's conflict because it's like, oh no, the way we started dating was actually kind of scummy. What are we gonna do? Yeah, I was right. That's exactly what happens. It's a full-on Harry Styles fanfic plot, and I'm here for it. Also, fun fact, Matt did borrow the $20 from the Bank of Simon to pay Brian to go on the date. Bank of Simon is still going strong.
I was thinking a quick, simple goodnight kiss on the cheek should be included for $20.
And initially, Brian is actually very sweet and kind about this. He clearly thinks very highly of Mary, even though he's intimidated to date her. So Mary and Brian go out on a little date, and at first it's super awkward because Brian doesn't know anything about basketball, and that's the only thing that Matt told him to talk about with Mary. So he brings up basketball, but then has nothing to talk about because he doesn't know anything about basketball. But Mary, quick on her feet, changes the subject. She's like, hey, do you like science? And they just start gab, 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 gab in a way.
I mean, if you can't stand the blood in the oozery, get out of the lab.
Yeah, see, you get it.
Do you watch the medical channel?
Oh, all the time.
Classic.
They're both little science geeks and they start talking about surgeries and stuff that they like, and they actually have a lot of similar interests. Brian's starting to be like, wait a second, this girl's really cool. He takes her home and then they kiss. Like, they kiss. He asks her to go out with him again.
You want to go out again sometime?
Like tomorrow night?
Yes. I'm free tomorrow night.
As soon as she goes in the house, Matt comes onto the porch and was like, dude, I gave you $20 to kiss her on the cheek, not do that kind of a kiss. And he's like, actually, I'm going to give your money back because I really like her and I want to take her out again. But Mary's just inside the door and she overhears this and she gets really upset. So that backfired big time. There's a whole plot to this where Mary kind of did the same thing to Lucy that Matt did to her, and all the drama comes full circle. Mary ends up talking to Brian and letting him say his piece. They have a really great conversation and decide that they are going to continue going out together, so that's awesome. So that works out. This episode's so good. It's so good. Anyway, the absolute most cutest part of this is that Ruthie needs to do swim lessons, but she really doesn't want to do swim lessons, so Simon decides that he's going to teach Ruthie how to swim. Throughout the episode, Simon and Ruthie are constantly in the bathroom with the bathtub full, and Simon is teaching Ruthie how to swim in the bathtub.
Never been prouder. Me either.
Their relationship is so cute. And it ends with Ruthie actually being able to swim in the big pool because Simon taught her, and it's so cute. I was not expecting to start liking this show so much.
So I just watched episode 10. This episode ended with Eric and Annie being so excited to be alone together. They literally broke their bed. That's adorable.
We're going on a diet. Good night.
What the fuck? That was so good. Why was that so good? I loved watched that episode. I think I'm a little hormonal right now.
Episode 11. This one's pretty interesting. Eric gets an opportunity to televise his sermon, and if his sermon does really well on television, then he'll get like a full show, and he's really, really excited about this opportunity. Like, he's so stressed out about it, but he's so excited. He is focused on prepping his sermon for this Sunday because he wants it to be absolutely perfect, like a banger, a really awesome sermon. So he's sitting in his office just prepping, and he ends up getting writer's block. He sends Annie off to do all his daily church chores, which then shifts Annie's responsibility to nobody. It ends up being a disaster. Simon in this episode is trying to learn how to do magic, and he asks Ruthie to be his assistant, but Ruthie's really jealous of him being the magician. She wants to be a magician too. She wants to know how to do the magic tricks, but Simon won't tell her. So she goes in to ask her dad if he'll teach her how to do the magic trick, and she catches him being so silly.
That's pretty good.
Thank you.
Colonel comes back in this episode, Eric's dad, and we were doing so good. We were doing so good without Colonel and Grandma Ruth, but you know what? Grandma Ruth is not in this episode, and I hate her infinitely more than Colonel. And weirdly enough, in this episode, I kind of liked him. I know. It's weird. I don't know how this is happening. The Colonel calls in and he learns that it's absolute chaos at home, so he immediately books a flight from New York to California and flies over to spend all day Saturday with the family to help them prep for Eric's big sermon on Sunday. And throughout the day, he's being really helpful and kind and really good with the kids and helps run the house. It was a really good way to see Colonel, and I'm softening up to him. I kind of like him a little bit now. I don't know. He did a really good job in this episode. I guess maybe he's not such a jerk anymore. The last time we interacted with him fixed all his weird controlling issues. Well, everything is going perfectly until the sermon. Eric is up giving his sermon while Simon and Ruthie are doing magic tricks in the congregation, and Ruthie does a magic trick where she shoves a mint up her nose and starts screaming at the top of her lungs, terrifying everyone in the congregation, causing the whole sermon to come to an abrupt end and church to be let out early. Yeah, so much for the television thing. Annie convinces Ruthie to blow the mint out of her nose, but they still go to the hospital just in case she did irreparable damage to her brain, I guess. By shoving a mint up her nose. She's totally fine, and the doctor at the hospital teaches her how to do the magic trick she's been wanting to know, so that ended up working out. Also throughout this episode, Matt's new asshole teacher is actually also the new basketball coach, and apparently he's a super good coach, and he's been helping Mary do more physical therapy and workouts so that she can prepare to be back on the team in a few weeks. He promises her he's gonna meet up for a workout, then he never shows up. He ghosts her. Then Mary goes and sees that he's actually working with the basketball team because there's a new girl who transferred over, and he was like coaching and working with that new girl. Mary feels really threatened by this new arrival, feels like she's not being valued, and she decides she wants to quit the team. After the church disaster, this new girl ends up showing up at church. She just moved into that area to go to school there for basketball, so because of that, she needed a place to go to church, and the basketball coach told her to go to Eric's church, so she did, and she met Mary there, and she was actually super sweet to Mary. She told Mary how much she admires her, how she's seen her play in the past, and how when she transferred over to the school, she was really excited to be able to play with Mary. And obviously this makes Mary feel a lot better about a new arrival, so she decides she actually is going to work hard and do her physical training so that she can be back on the basketball team in a couple of weeks. Looks like pretty soon she's gonna be back at it, and her knee's totally fine, and that whole cliffhanger from the last season was pointless, I think. We love that, don't we? We love that. This is the halfway point for season 2. I'm gonna watch the rest of the season, and then we'll report back later. It got really dark in that last recording, not because it was late at night. In fact, it still should have been perfectly bright outside. As soon as I stopped recording, it started storming, so that was really fun. Well, I've just finished the second half of season 2. Let me tell you, it's still crazy. We're starting off episode 12 with another pedo episode. Yeah, we got another one of those.
Coach Coper is the greatest.
The greatest what? Jerk? Creep? Nightmare? I mean, come on, give me a hint.
The coach's name is Mr. Coper. I haven't mentioned that before. And Mary is just talking him up through the beginning of this episode. Like, she is so excited to be working with him to the point where some of her siblings are curious if that maybe she has a little crush on him.
Maybe when she's back on the team, she'll stop talking about Coper.
Yeah, I think she's got a little crush on Coper.
which she denies. And to be fair to her, I don't think she actually does have a crush on him. She's just really excited to be healing up and getting closer to playing basketball again. But it's important that the crush seed was planted because, yeah, if you haven't guessed already, Mr. Coper's the pedo. And he's been helping Mary train so that she can get back on the team, back to playing, right as rain, good as new. And Mary has just accomplished her all-time record for her fastest mile she's ever run. After Mary hops off the treadmill, there is a big hug exchanged between Mary and Mr. Coper. It's a long hug. Lucy walks in and sees them hugging, and she feels really uncomfortable with it. She has a gut feeling that something's wrong in that situation. She tries to confront Mary about it, but Mary gets super defensive, and then she turns to Matt.
I saw Coach Coper hug her.
Hug how? What kind of hug?
A hug, I guess. I don't know, I just got a bad feeling about it.
And Matt is not messing around. He immediately confronts Mr. Coper, gets his chest all puffed up and goes to tell Mr. Coper who's boss. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Coper is boss because he sends Matt to the principal's office, which to me seems like a really counterintuitive thing to do if you're being accused of a crime. Send the person accusing you of the crime to your superior. But okay, maybe it was a smart move because it makes him look more innocent. I don't know, but it does seem for a while that Mr. Coper is innocent. Then there's a part where he starts getting a little creepy with Mary.
You are tense. That's not going to help your game. Tell me what you're really thinking about. I mean, after all, you can't tell me anything.
Being a little creep. Lucy's gut feeling was super right, and he's not good. He says something to Mary that's really threatening and manipulative.
I don't like this. I have to go.
Whoa, hold on. Don't be such a baby. Besides, where are you going to go?
Luckily, right at that time, the principal and Annie as well walk into the room with Mr. Coper and Mary.
You and your brother and your sister made such complete idiots out of yourself in the principal's office yesterday. Who's gonna believe you?
And he gets fired on the spot, so...
You're fired, Coach Coper.
You're lucky you're still breathing.
Now, the other part of this episode... I'm laughing because I am uncomfortable. At Eric's church, there's a guy named Lou who is a member of the church but also is the church treasurer, so he's in charge of the monies. He's acting really shady about the finances.
I'd like you to look at the books. You don't have a problem with that, do you, Lou?
You mean, do I have a problem with your thinking you know more about the church finances than I do?
So Eric smartly decides that he's gonna take the books and double check what's going on with the money, even though Lou is not a fan of that. As Annie and Eric are checking the books, they discover that $2,500 is missing from the church. And they do, in fact, suspect Lou. Eric keeps trying to confront Lou, and he's acting so shady throughout the episode. There's a part where Annie sees Lou's wife at the grocery store with another man, and they're all like, wait, is his wife cheating on him? That doesn't make sense. What's going on? Also, why the heck does he need this money? Because he has a great job. Lots of questions, lots of shadiness, and you will not believe what the answer to this puzzle is. Lou does admit to taking the money, but he also says he was planning on paying it back and he still will pay it back, but even so, he's pretty ashamed of himself and ends up quitting his job at the church. Eric just wants to know what's going on and thinks that him quitting is pretty drastic, so he goes to visit Lou at his house and discovers the big secret behind this money disappearing. Lou has a son that nobody knew about, a secret, shameful son who has very severe autism. And the thing that's like so difficult about their autistic son is that he needs to have like a rigid routine every day, and if his routine is broken, he throws tantrums. And it was just way too much for them to handle, so they sent him away to like a special needs home to take care of him. And I guess being sent away was actually really good for their kid because he loved it. He loved being at the special needs home, so I guess that was good, I think. I don't know, I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, okay? I'm trying. But the part of this that's so icky is that Lou and his wife were so embarrassed about their son and also not being able to take care of him the way that he needed that they just wanted him to be a secret. They didn't tell anyone about their secret autistic son. It's just so icky. No. Shame on you, Lou. Anyway, how does the money fit into all of this, right? Well, Turns out the home was closing down and they needed to put him somewhere else. And there was some other place with a waiting list, but in order to get on the waiting list, they needed a deposit of $2,500. Hence why Lou stole the $2,500 from the church. That's it. That's the reason. Episode 13. This one starts off right away with just the silliest thing. There were some lizards in Ruthie's class. I think they were the class pets or someone brought them and didn't want them anymore. But Ruthie ended up becoming the new owner of these 2 lizards. The lizards were a pretty funny running plot through the story. Not anything significant, but they were hilarious, so I'm gonna tell you about it. The lizards were named Lester and Lizzie, and I guess they got the genders wrong because the boy's Lizzie and the girl is Lester. Lester ends up laying eggs, but plot twist, Lizzie ends up eating the eggs, and then Lester eats Lizzie, and then Lester dies, and Ruthie and Simon flush it down the toilet. So that's the story of the lizards. Another silly part of this episode is that Annie's dad comes into town, and he tells Annie beforehand that he's not bringing his girlfriend Ginger because they're kind of on a weird break because, quote from Grandpa, she doesn't like change.
I've made a few changes in my life, and Ginger just doesn't seem comfortable with change.
Then when we see him, he is wearing a toupee, and it is atrocious. And Annie and Eric try so hard to be supportive of him throughout the episode, but yeah, no, the toupee is bad. And also apparently the reason why Ginger broke up with him. But we get another plot twist. Grandpa, I guess, was sabotaging his relationship with Ginger because he realized he still had feelings for his late wife, and he felt like that meant he couldn't be dating Ginger anymore. And the toupee was like the cherry on top of him sabotaging everything with Ginger. Annie talks some sense into him in the end, helping him realize that he can, in fact, have feelings for his late wife and also date someone else and have feelings for her too. He goes back home and we assume he gets back together with Ginger. I mean, he does because we see her in the last couple episodes. Now, the big story of this episode is about Lucy and Jimmy Moon. Jimmy Moon is single again.
Jimmy Moon broke up with Ashley.
And I was incorrect about Rod disappearing into the continuity void because Rod does in fact return in this episode, and he is now just as important a character as Jimmy Moon, which is insane to me. Considering Jimmy was the main boyfriend through the entirety of season 1, and we've seen Rod for 1 episode about weed. But yeah, Jimmy's single now, and he's trying to get Lucy back, and now Rod sees that Jimmy's going for Lucy, so Rod's now back in the picture because now he wants Lucy too. So she's now in the middle of a fight over her. She needs to make a choice. One boy, the other boy, or none of the boys. Classic conundrum of the teenage hero in dystopian novels. After Lucy tells her mom about this, Annie is obviously very concerned, but she plays it off really well.
Jimmy Moon broke up with Ashley. We could get back together. Only Rod wants me to go with him instead. Pretty exciting, huh?
Rod and Jimmy? Yes, that's very exciting. 2 very exciting choices.
She's so supportive, but she is so worried. I love it.
2 very exciting choices.
Also, Jimmy's voice dropped, so the man's has gone through a little bit of puberty.
Lucy Mather, we're with you. Alone.
And Rod is still nuts.
I would never tell you not to talk to your old boyfriend. See you later, mi chica chinga cabeza.
Rod is nuts. As the boys are fighting over Lucy through this episode, they come to the conclusion that they need to change themselves to try and win her over. So Jimmy tries to be more edgy like Rod, and Rod tries to be more, sophisticated and mature and responsible like Jimmy. So Jimmy ends up dyeing half of his hair purple while Rod shaves his mustache. Lucy admires that they both made those choices. She's like proud of them in a weird way, and then she chooses none of them. They are both terrible choices.
2 very exciting choices.
They agree to all be friends in the end. That's episode 13. Oh yeah, I'm just remembering what happens in episode 14 and oh my god. In this episode we get another single mother. So, fourth single mom of season 2. At the beginning of the episode, the family's at a restaurant and the waitress there is this single mother. It's a really weird, uncomfortable opening scene where for some reason this restaurant just has weird restrictions and rules.
I can't put them on the side, they come on the plate. If they came on the side, they'd be sides.
And the only thing they can actually get is like liver. Super weird. The point is though, we meet this single mother named Harriet. Eric is out and about doing his duties. He's at a store when a little hungry kid walks in and asks for something. And I guess every day this kid comes and just gets food from this store and the guy just lets him take it.
Clarence, he's a sweet kid. Comes in every day after school, picks up a can and leaves. Just let him take what he wants. He needs the food.
Eric, of course, decides that this is now his business, so he follows the kid home and knocks on the door. And this little kid doesn't let him inside because he's like, you're a stranger, but I also don't want you to leave, so can you just stay and wait on the doorstep until my mom comes home because I'm lonely and bored. So he does. He says his mom's not gonna get home till nighttime, so it's gonna be hours, and Eric agrees to sit on the porch for hours just waiting for this kid's mom to come home. And when she does finally come home, it's Harriet, the lady from earlier. Eric starts investigating into why they're so destitute, why they're struggling, and here's the story. A few years back, Harriet had met some guy who wooed her and was really nice to her son, and they were living together for a while, and they decided to file a joint tax return, even though they were not married. So this man who was living with them took the joint tax return and went to file it, and then never came back. He vanished. After this, Harriet starts getting harassed by the IRS because she filed a joint tax return with this guy. They're coming after her now to collect his debt to the IRS? I'm no accountant, but I don't think that's how that works. I mean, at the very least, the show is aware that this is illegal, and that's the whole premise. Harriet has been working with this guy from the IRS who's like in charge of her case and has been trying to convince him that this is not her debt, but she eventually just gave up after they harassed her enough and just started paying it off. She had to take on a second job in order to do that. No matter what she did, no matter how hard she tried, no one would listen to her and they were still coming after her, so she just laid down and took it. If anyone's familiar with the ins and outs of the scandals within the IRS, does this happen ever? Is this a common thing? Is it also common for them to be relentless and not believe you when you say that you don't owe that debt because it's in the name of another human being? So Eric goes to the local IRS office and he finds the guy in charge of Harriet's case. And this IRS agent refuses to help, refuses to listen to Eric. He wants nothing to do with this. Also, apparently this guy is retiring in a couple of weeks. And after he retires, Harriet's case is going to be set in stone. No one can change anything on it for some reason. So we got to solve this now. This is very pressing, important work. And if you thought this story couldn't get any crazier, guess what happens in the middle of their conversation?
I'm not leaving here till we resolve this.
It is resolved. There is no more resolving.
What is it?
My chest. I think it's my heart.
This guy has a full-on heart attack out of nowhere. What? So Eric takes it upon himself to take this guy to the hospital, and it gets worse. When he gets to the hospital, they won't admit him, even though he's currently in the process of heart attack. They refuse to admit this guy because he doesn't have his like insurance card on him in that moment. So now Eric has to go on a mission. He leaves this guy in the waiting room of the hospital to go find his insurance card. And then he comes back later and they still won't let him in for some reason. But then Eric gets super upset because this guy could be literally dying, and finally they let him in. After Eric like yells at them. Eric talks to one of the doctors to figure out if this guy's okay, and the doctor tells him that he's totally fine. He actually didn't have a heart attack, he just had heartburn. The IRS agent doesn't know that yet, so he still thinks that he's in heart attack mode. Eric decides to take advantage of the situation and be a little manipulative. This guy thinks that he's gonna have to do like open heart surgery and that he could probably die this day. He's legitimately terrified, and Eric sits down and they have like a deathbed conversation. This guy's full of regret and he's like, man, I just wish I could have been a better person. And Eric convinces him to be a better person by taking a second look at Harriet's case. He immediately has a change of heart and decides that he is going to help Harriet refund all her money and all of that. And then Harriet ends up coming into the hospital and talking to him. It's just bizarre, to say the least.
I am sorry that I didn't take care of your problem before, but I am going to take care of it right now.
A little bit later, the doctor comes in and tells him that he just had heartburn and there's no need for any surgeries. He's fine. And the guy's like, wow, it's a miracle.
It is a miracle.
And ain't that the most Christian thing you ever did see? The amount of times I've heard the word miracle thrown around so loosely for stuff that has very logical, perfectly normal explanations, but if something goes your way and relieves a little bit of your stress, it's a miracle for a lot of modern Christians, at least ones that I know. So silly. So silly. You do you, y'all. Believe what you want, but I'm gonna giggle at you a little bit, okay? Sorry. Episode 15 was kind of weird and slightly infuriating. Before I get to the main plot, I just wanted to point out there's a part of this episode where Matt calls God a he or she.
Why is God smiting me? He's a spiteful God.
He or she is not. It's spiteful.
Yeah, well, that too, apparently.
So what does this mean about Matt? Is Matt progressive? I think he might be. I think he might be a little bit progressive. I'm standing by Matt as my most favorite character. The majority of this episode is about Mary. Today's homecoming. It's the big day and a big game, and Mary is finally ready to actually play basketball again for the first time. She's back. Mary has a bit of a prophetic dream at the beginning of the episode. She falls over and hurts her knee, and I think that's a reflection of how nervous she is that she's gonna get hurt, nervous to get herself back out on the court again. She's kind of miserable the entire episode and just not fun to interact with or be around.
Someone totally cool. Someone tall, handsome. The worst thing that can happen to a person. Tell me about it.
I have not liked Mary very much this season.
I didn't hear the last part because Mary just shut me in the closet.
And there have been a couple episodes that she's just been a pain. But this one particularly is the beginning of when I started to just hate Mary. I don't like to say that. I don't want to hate Mary, but she's forcing my hand in this season. I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, this episode, she's just kind of a pill.
Well, we're hoping that the knee's fine, and I haven't officially come back yet, and I definitely don't have a date, so I think I'll pass.
We also get a return of this guy who was so inconsequential that I didn't even mention him in the last season recap. His name is Johnny or Richard also. He has both names, I think. His whole thing is that he's a little bit older than Mary and was widely known to be a bit of a player, and he asks her out and they just make out all the time when they're supposed to be doing homework. Like, that's their entire relationship. And then we find out in the end of that episode that he just couldn't read at all, which is why he would just make out with girls instead of doing homework. And he talks to Annie, and Annie convinces him to go learn how to read. And so he breaks up with Mary so that he can actually focus on school. That was his whole storyline. Didn't seem worth mentioning, but he's back in this episode because Mary needed some support and he was there for her, and then he ends up asking her to homecoming. And I have a question. What happened to Brian? Remember Brian from just a couple of episodes ago that they hit it off super well and they were really geeky and sciencey together, and it was so cute, and I absolutely love Brian. He's my favorite person Mary's dated thus far. Brian! Where'd you go? This man, unlike Rod, is actually lost to the continuity void, and I am upset about it. I guess the writers didn't care that much about Brian. He was one of those one-episode flings, and I object. Mary plays basketball, she does great, but she does end up falling down in the exact same way of her dream from earlier. That's why I called it a prophetic dream. She saw the future. Even though she fell down and hurt her knee, she didn't. She's fine. She didn't hurt her knee. She's fine. The game goes great, and Mary is back in basketball. Episode 16, we get the Hamilton family back in the picture, another Hamilton episode. And there's really only one of those this season, which is kind of a shame because the Hamiltons are really cool. And I gotta tell you, this one might take me a second to talk about because there is so much going on in this episode. We do heists with the Hamilton family. That's what we do here in Seventh Heaven. The initial plan is that both families were gonna get together and do a little family party. You know, just doing dinner, all hanging out together. Eric is thinking ahead though, and he knows that that's not actually gonna happen because a lot of the kids are gonna want to go off and do their own thing, and most likely they'll just be left with Ruthie and the other youngest girl of the family who's named Lynn. So Eric is devising a plan to have a guys' night with Morgan or Reverend Hamilton. Both Morgan and Eric convince their wives to let them go off and do their own thing for that day.
Just two hard-working minister guys just getting away from it all, shooting a little pool.
And what they end up going to do took me by complete surprise.
You the Reverend Hamilton? Yes. I'm Kevin, Patricia's ex-husband.
Yeah, they want to meet Kevin from last season.
After 20 years, you finally want to talk about Kevin.
Oh, Kevin's his name. He calls himself Patricia's first husband.
I did not expect that we were going to see any kind of follow-up resolution about Kevin. And if you didn't watch my first video, Kevin is Reverend Hamilton's wife, Patricia, her ex-husband, who calls her every Valentine's Day for some reason. And Morgan has decided enough is enough. I need to meet this guy. I need to confront him face to face and see why the heck he's trying to call my wife every Valentine's Day. They made a big deal about this guy being Irish in the last season.
What kind of name is Kevin, anyway? Was he Irish or something?
As a matter of fact, he is Irish.
He's not.
Irish?
You got a problem with the Irish?
He's Irish? Irish?
Yes.
I don't think that he's, Irish. I think he's just white.
That's right, he's white.
Is what they were trying to say. Cause,
Playing us a score down, would you? My bank card is Bon Jacks. And he dead.
He ain't got no accent, just a regular old white guy. Kevin is in a wheelchair, and we learned that it's because after he and Patricia split up, he enlisted in the military and got sent off to Vietnam. And he specifies that the reason he never tried to see Patricia again is because he was in a wheelchair and he didn't want her to see that. But, you know, I would have thought that it's because they broke up. They got divorced. That's probably why you wouldn't plan on seeing someone again. We don't know why they got divorced, but they're apparently extremely amicable with one another, which is very rare. I'm just really confused by what their relationship is. We also learn that the reason Kevin calls her every single Valentine's Day is because it reminds him of a time when he was younger.
Calling Patty helps me remember a time in my life when I was more carefree and stupid.
What? He even got remarried. Like, he has a wife now. He's happily with someone. I don't understand why you need to tell your ex-wife Happy Valentine's Day to remember your carefree days. She divorced you. That shouldn't be a happy memory. I'm so confused by this man. But by the end of the night, Eric and Morgan invite him over to meet Patricia and the kids. So he does?
Oh my God. Kevin, it is so good to see you.
It's so weird. Why? Why did they? Why? God, that is only the beginning of this episode. Lucy starts hanging out with this kid named Scott because he's good at algebra and she's struggling, so he's gonna help her with algebra. Mary sees Lucy and Scott talking in the hallway, and then after he leaves, Mary runs up to Lucy and is like, "Oh, girl, spill. Like, he's really cute. I mean, what's going on? And Lucy very clearly is like, no, not like that. He's just helping me with algebra. Later in the episode, Scott comes over to help Lucy with algebra. And while Lucy is not into Scott, Mary sure is. And apparently Scott's into Mary too, because he tells her that the only reason he offered to help Lucy with her math is so that he would get a chance to talk to Mary and ask her out on a date.
I was hoping I could meet you. Even though you know I'm 14, you'd see I don't act 14, and you'd maybe go out with me.
And she says yes.
Like a date?
How about a movie?
Okay.
But she's a little bit embarrassed that he's younger than her, so she doesn't want anybody to know. I don't know how old Mary is right now. I don't think it's ever really mentioned. Last season, she was 14, and I'm assuming this season that she's 16, but she can't drive yet. Either she's a very old 15 or she's 16 and just doesn't have her license. There's a bit of an age difference. It's not a huge gap though, and I personally don't think it would be that big of a deal if they dated, you know, if that's the age gap. I mean, it's high school. It's not that weird. She convinces Matt to drop her off at the movie theater, saying she's meeting up with some friends while she's actually secretly meeting up with Scott. When Mary gets there, Scott looks at her, eyes are up and down, is like, oh, wow, you look so good. But she's just like wearing a bulky jacket. They were gonna go into a movie that must have been rated R or something, but they couldn't go in because Scott didn't have an ID with him, so they had to go to the only other alternative at this movie theater, which was a cartoon show. And that's what they call it. It's just the cartoon show.
Then I guess it's two for the cartoon movie.
While they're watching the movie, Scott tries to put his arm around Mary. Well, he does, and she says, "You're 14," just shutting him down immediately. And she starts having major regrets about going on this date. We're gonna pause that storyline for a second and get into what Simon and Nigel Hamilton are up to in this one. They get invited to a makeout party.
This is an invitation to one of Jessica Donner's makeout parties? How'd this happen? Who cares?
They're like 12, but it's like widely known in the school that this girl throws makeout parties. What? What's a makeout party? Is that real? Is that like an orgy for children? I don't know about that. After they get the invitation to this party, Simon and Nigel are just so surprised they got invited. It turns out there's this girl, Laura, who has a little crush on Simon, and she asked for him to get invited to the party, so that's why they're going. But this is a little bit sketchy because Nigel tells Simon that Laura is widely known as the makeout champion.
Way to go, stud. Laura's the makeout champion of all time.
So that definitely means that she has her eyes on making out with Simon, who has never kissed anyone before. Well, this party starts off seemingly normal. The parents are there, but then the girl throwing the party convinces her parents, okay, it's time to go upstairs, leave us alone. She immediately dims the lights and starts playing sexy music, and all the kids start like finding a dance partner. And then after dancing for a while, the girl who's throwing the party is like, okay, it's time for 7 minutes in heaven. Oof. Okay. That's what they mean by makeout party. Got it. Simon and Laura volunteer to go first for 7 minutes in heaven. They sit down in the closet and start talking to each other, and it's actually really sweet. We learn that Laura has actually never kissed anyone either. One boy from a previous party had tried to get her to make out during 7 minutes in heaven, and she refused him, but afterward he went out and spread the rumor that she did and that she makes out with everybody. So that's how the makeout champion rumor started. She and Simon talk about comic books and how they have a lot in common, and she tells Simon that she has a crush on him, and I'm pretty sure he says he likes her back. They end up both consensually deciding that they want to have their first kiss. And right as they lean in for just a tiny little peck, the door opens to the girl's dad at the party, and they get in big trouble. Hi! The first people who do 7 minutes in heaven while the party's going on, for some reason, the dad decides to just stop letting his kid have free reign of the house and come downstairs and snoop around. That's so weird. Like, they've done this before so many times, and now the dad decides to do something about it. What are the odds, you know? So that's a super embarrassing first kiss story for Simon and Lara, and Simon gets forever uninvited from these parties moving forward. And also, we never see Lara again. Awesome. Now we're gonna move on to Lucy and Keisha Hamilton. Keisha has been getting terrible grades, and it's because she's just spending all her time with her boyfriend. And Keisha's parents essentially forced her to break up with her boyfriend because her grades were so bad. So today, she is planning to secretly meet up with her boyfriend at the movies. She invites Lucy to join her, so she has the excuse to tell her parents of like, no, I just want to go do something fun with Lucy because we're super good friends. They meet up there at the movies with Keisha's boyfriend, who, by the way, looks like he's 25 years old, and he also invited another kid in Lucy's class who she has a big crush on, so it's a double date. And we will get back to them in a minute as well. Matt and John Hamilton in this episode go to a nightclub. John surprises Matt by being the singer featured at the nightclub that night. And apparently he's gotten signed on with a record deal and stuff. He's gonna like pursue music professionally. Very random, but really cool for him.
Negativity, wasting energy.
As Eric had predicted, all the kids are off doing their own thing, and the big family get-together was in fact reduced to Annie and Patricia with Ruthie and Lynn. So the moms are hanging out with the younger girls. Right at the beginning of this episode, we see Lynn and Ruthie in their kindergarten class together, and Ruthie has a huge crush on their substitute teacher.
But I need Mr. Lim's opinion on my picture. Stop flirting with my boyfriend. Mr. Lim isn't your boyfriend. He's a substitute and he's my boyfriend.
Yeah. So they both individually think Mr. Lim is their boyfriend, their substitute teacher.
Hi, Mr. Lim.
And the whole rest of their storyline is them trying to figure out how they can seduce him. That's insane. Lynn asks her mom how to make a boy fall in love with you.
I need to know how to make a boy fall in love with me quick.
How quick?
Before Miss Rainey gets well, so give me everything you got, sister.
Ruthie puts on a bra that she somehow had that's also somehow her size. And she does that to look more mature for her boyfriend.
I need a more mature look. She's just trying to take my boyfriend. And your chest is crooked anyway.
And Annie has no questions about this.
Maybe this will help. If you two can stop fighting and be nice to each other, we've got a surprise for you.
We're gonna take you to a movie.
Which kind of upsets me a little bit because it shows that Annie does have a double standard for Ruthie and Lucy. She tells Ruthie she's allowed to wear whatever she wants, but then reprimanded Lucy for dressing too mature at the mall. But now when Ruthie's wearing a literal bra as a 6-year-old, Annie has nothing to say about it. No words. Isn't that super inappropriate? I don't know. I'm just saying. Poor Lucy. She has a tough time, doesn't she? Near the end of the episode, Lynn asks Ruthie if she can try on the bra too, and that kind of solves their beef over their substitute teacher. They just forgot about him completely because they're just really excited to be wearing bras. Now, you may or may not have noticed that I mentioned both Mary and Keisha and Lucy all ended up at the movie theater. Well, Annie, Patricia, Ruthie, and Lynn also, by the end of the night, end up at the same movie theater, going to the same movie, even though they walk in super late. Just, okay. All right. There is one thing happening in this town tonight, and it is that cartoon movie. Now, everyone who went to the movies tonight is in the theater together. Ruthie and Lynn are looking around, and they see these two couples in front of them just making out through the movie.
Come on, you two. Watch the movie.
This is better.
Yeah, so that was Keisha and Lucy.
Keisha?
Oopsie.
Dear God, my mom's here.
Mary gets away. She doesn't get caught on her date with the 14-year-old, even though going on a date with a 14-year-old at her age is far less incriminating than making out in a movie theater with your boyfriend who you're supposed to not be with. Even though Mary didn't get caught and didn't get in trouble at all, she's still a little bit disgusted with herself for some reason. She shuts Scott down again, and that relationship is effectively over. But yeah, Keisha and Lucy got in very big trouble. They really should not have been making out like that in a movie theater full of people and full of children. Just not the smartest decision to make. Episode 17. Oh, this episode. Oh my god. This one, there is no good news in this episode. I only have bad news to report. Wilson comes back. Wilson comes back in this episode. Why Wilson? What happened to Brian? Wilson is so boring. I just don't care. I don't like Wilson. I don't care about Wilson, but Wilson's back. He calls Mary because his parents are out of town and he's going to prom that night and he needs someone to babysit his son. The little boy, Billy, little Billy boy. He's taken another girl out to a dance. You know, when Mary shows up, there's still obviously some tension between them.
Hey, Billy, how are ya? Oh, you are getting so big.
You look good holding my kid.
Well, you look good in a tux.
Ew. Oh. Mary is super cute with Billy, though. It was fun watching her interact with Billy.
We are gonna have such a good time, aren't we?
This storyline ends up with Wilson leaving prom early because he was just not having a very good time, and he goes back to hang out with Mary instead. So Wilson has been reintroduced and looks like there's tension again, unfortunately. Now, the other part of this episode is so intense and so sad. Lucy has had a really tough time this season, and it's about to get worse. At the beginning of the episode, she's talking to her friend Sarah, and she ends up meeting Sarah's older sister Jen, and they're both super cool. Jen especially is really friendly and kind.
Sarah and I are going to Pete's Pizza tonight. You want to come with us? Really? Of course. Any friend of Sarah's is a friend of mine.
We learned that Jen just got her driver's license, and sometimes she lets Sarah drive, even though Sarah's only 14. But she specifies she only allows her to drive in really safe places like a parking lot. Jen and Sarah invite Lucy to hang out with them that night, and she thinks they're super cool, and she's so excited to hang out with them. She goes and talks to her mom about it. Annie says, absolutely not. No, I don't know these people, and I'm not letting you get in a car with someone who just barely got their license. I don't think so. I'm not comfortable. Lucy's super disappointed about this. She really, really, really wants to hang out with these friends. She orchestrates a plan to make everyone happy. They decide that Matt is going to give her a ride to a pizza place, and the other girls are going to meet her at the pizza place where they're just going to have some dinner, and then Matt's going to pick her up and take her home. So Lucy will not be in the car with these other girls at any point during the night. That was the deal that they made. Lucy gets a call before going to the pizza place informing her that plans have changed a little bit, that the other girls just aren't really feeling pizza. They want to go get a burger, and they want to go to a burger joint specifically that is 30 miles away. They decide they're going to lie to everybody. Instead of having pizza at the pizza place, they're going to pick her up at the pizza place and then go over to a burger joint 30 miles away and then take her back to the pizza place before Matt picks her up, which that's like a full hour of driving. How long were you planning to eat pizza for? I guarantee you Matt would come pick her up before then, but I digress. These are children. They don't have critical thinking skills fully developed. After Lucy has been dropped off at the pizza place, we see the perspective of Eric as there's a knock at the door from a police officer informing them that there was a car with very young girls in it. As the girls were driving, a kid ran in front of the car and caused them to have a severe accident. I don't think the kid got hurt, but they got severely hurt. We learn that the girls in the car were in fact Lucy's friends. Sarah ended up passing away from this accident, and Jen sustained severe injuries and was taken to the hospital. Luckily, Lucy was not with them at the time. Annie goes to pick up Lucy from the pizza place, and she's been waiting there for forever and has no idea that something has happened to her friends because they got in the accident on the way to pick her up from the pizza place. Another important factor we learn here is that Jen allowed Sarah to drive the car, which is why the accident happened supposedly. Let's just rewind for a second. Jen said she only allows Sarah to drive in safe places, so I don't know why she would have suddenly changed her rule for this one night. It doesn't make any sense, but I guess she did. And unfortunately, it was the most extreme and fatal consequence of that decision. Very intense. And by the way, at this point, we're only halfway through the episode, so Sarah dying happens really fast in this story. 1 minute she's there and then she is gone. Lucy obviously is having a very hard time with this, and she also is suffering from an extreme case of survivor's guilt, and she feels like everything that happened was her fault.
If I hadn't told them to pick me up, she might still be alive. It's all my fault. Nothing will ever be the same again.
Lucy is just really struggling with this. She shuts down completely and doesn't really talk to anybody, but she's clearly struggling and she needs help. Eventually, Eric gets the idea to call up Wilson, Mary's boyfriend, or I guess former boyfriend who's about to be boyfriend again, because Wilson's wife passed away during childbirth, so he's experienced something like this before. Luckily, this plan of Eric's does in fact work, and Wilson and Lucy have a really good conversation. She opens up to him. He ends up taking her to a support group that really helps her out. That's how we help Lucy heal from this traumatic event. Because Wilson and Lucy become a bit closer through this situation, Lucy's able to learn from Wilson that he actually does still have big feelings for Mary, and the reason he broke up with her wasn't actually out of fear of having sex with her. It's actually because he's afraid he's going to lose her the way he lost his last wife. So he has this trauma around his romantic interest passing away, and he's just terrified that that's going to happen to Mary too. Lucy doesn't explicitly tell this to Mary, but she does tell Mary she needs to call Wilson because there's still something there. We can assume now they are back together. Yeah, that's episode 17 for you. Very heavy and a little bit traumatic. They're really trying to get to some heavy topics in this season. Episode 18 is super fun. I really liked this one a lot. In the very beginning, Eric does a Mr. Kim move.
Do you want a kalbichim? I can make your favorite. Huh?
Stop! I'm open to any volunteers. Halt!
If you haven't watched Kim's Convenience, it's a very good show. I highly recommend it. Eric agrees to take in a French exchange student without talking to Annie about it first. My initial thought was that they were gonna try and like convert this kid to Christianity and it was gonna go, you know, a more spiritual direction. I was so wrong about that. This episode is just the most silly chaos. So this French exchange student, I believe, is about Matt's age, and his name is Guy. It's spelled like guy, but it's pronounced Guy. Anyone who knows French, is that actually how a French person would pronounce that? Like if it's G-U-Y, would you say Guy?
Please, call me Guy.
Let me know, because I don't know French, and I don't know if that's actually how that would be done. It just seems a little weird to me. So let's meet Guy.
It is so kind of you to allow me to stay here when you already have 5 children, no?
No, his accent.
You must be quite a woman to maintain such a household and still look like a model from a fashion magazine.
Oh, the accent sounds so fake, man. It's so bad.
The President Emmanuel Macron told us that the Seine River will be clean to swim inside, and he wanted to take a swim to show us that it's clean. So people who want to complain about Macron are planning to take a shit in the Seine River.
I met a couple of French airline attendants on the way over. Maybe I give them a call.
Ruthie immediately hates Guy and also turns into a boomer for a second.
Bonjour, Ruthie.
This is America. Speak English.
Lucy starts crushing on Guy like immediately because she's Lucy. Also a little bit later, Mary, in addition, is crushing on Guy because he is French. Why would you not have crush? No, I'm not even gonna try that. I'm not even gonna try that. I mean, I'm not gonna try it again, is what I mean. My theory about Guy is that he has a very heavy facade going on. Like, he is just never what he seems. He's never telling the truth to people. We get a few glimpses of his true feelings.
Stupid Americans.
Yeah, let's talk about the fact that he smokes in their house. Lucy's trying to flirt with Guy, and he's like heavily flirting back.
What do French men consider to be the most beautiful part of a woman?
The eyes. A woman's eyes are the windows to her soul.
Oh, it's so Tumblr, and this accent is so bad. Guy invites Mary and Lucy to go to the pool hall. Then he starts hitting on Mary. Ugh.
I thought it might be just the two of us.
Maybe tomorrow night?
Yes, tomorrow night.
You. So while they're at the pool hall, Matt shows up with a date, and turns out this girl actually went to Paris to study abroad for a bit, so she knows French. And she and Guy hit it off immediately and just start talking in French to each other, and the rest of the kids are just sitting there. So Matt ends up just leaving his date with Guy and takes his sisters home. While the older kids are away at the pool hall, Simon and Ruthie go through Guy's stuff and find his cigarettes. And they've heard stories from people before about how they had smoked a cigarette when they were really young and it was so disgusting that they never touched one ever again, and they decide to do that intentionally.
If you smoke enough to get sick, you'll remember it the rest of your life. Exactly.
They're like, this is our chance. We're never gonna get another opportunity to do this. We need to get those cigarettes in our system so we will never want to smoke again.
If you're old enough to smoke, you're old enough to light it yourself. I'm not allowed to play with matches? You're not allowed to smoke either, Einstein.
So they talk themselves into this, and Simon and Ruthie, I don't think they smoke the entire pack of cigarettes, but they try smoking cigarettes and they get sick.
You never should have made me do this. These things cause cancer, you know. You would have got me to light up in the first place.
Also, in case you were wondering, their dog still perfectly understands English, so that's super fun.
You better go get Mom, girl. Please, Happy, go get her.
Oh yeah, we've got to talk about the internet.
Welcome to the World Wide Web.
The technology of dial-up internet has been introduced in this episode, and Simon is teaching his mom how to use a chat room. Eric is at the church on his computer trying to write his sermon, and he's on a chat room, and while Simon's teaching Annie how to use a chat room, they end up finding each other. Simon sets up what's supposed to be a private chat, but it's not private. He didn't do it right. Annie and Eric basically doing foreplay in this private chat. They're like sexting, and there are these two other kids just lurking in the chat room, watching them basically sexting through the chat room. Oh, it is so funny.
No wonder they got kids.
Yeah. Anyway, there's this part where the dog comes to get Annie so that she can help the other kids who just smoked cigarettes, and she leaves the computer and it's just Eric there. And those two kids who've been watching the whole time take the opportunity to hack in a little bit and pretend to be Annie. They start messaging Eric as Annie, and it gets so silly. Oh my god.
You are so hot. From now on, I'm calling you
Reverend Spice Boy.
They never figure out that this happened. They never put two and two together, even though Eric references the fake conversation that Annie never had.
I liked his computer.
Spice Boy liked his computer, too.
But it really worked for them as foreplay because they start making out hard at the end of this episode. Back to Guy, because this isn't over. After Eric discovers that Simon and Ruthie got into the cigarettes, he thinks that Guy gave the cigarettes to the kids, so he rushes over to the pool hall to find Guy chatting up with Matt's date, and he pulls him away from Matt's date and sits down to have a conversation. And Guy just like tells a completely different narrative that we were not seeing.
Both Mary and Lucy think that you're interested in them.
I was hoping maybe to get some advice from Mary and Lucy. That's all.
I think we're supposed to assume that that is actually the truth.
This most certainly is a cultural misunderstanding.
That that's what his real intentions and real story is, but I'm not buying it, okay? I saw the way he intentionally was leading Mary on. You cannot tell me that that's not what was happening. No, he convinces Eric that he's just being French. He was just being French.
Women get the wrong impression about the Frenchmen. We are as addicted to women as we are to cigarettes.
He did nothing wrong. His only crime was being French. The family's sick of him and they all want him to leave, and he overhears that, and he's also sick of them, so he wants to leave, and he ends up packing up and, like, I guess flying back to France that night.
Stupid Americans.
We heard that!
That's the story of Guy. Episode 19 is so crazy, dude. It's crazy. Like, these episodes are getting more and more unhinged. I cannot. Also, apparently it's Thanksgiving time in this episode, but they don't do much about that other than say it's Thanksgiving one time, so I don't know. This episode starts with us getting just the most beautiful look inside of Lucy's little pick-me brain.
I'm more of a
woman whose sexual nature is hidden beneath her perkiness? Just because I'm petite doesn't mean my emotions are petite.
Yeah, but unfortunately it's because Mary has been reading her diary, which is not cool. Mary is just ruthless, relentless about invading Lucy's privacy and reading her diary and saying out loud to everybody what Lucy has written in her diary. And Lucy's understandably super upset. This is her privacy. She's being invaded, but Mary's just being a brat.
I didn't know I needed a lock.
Well, you do if you don't want people to keep reading your private thoughts.
Keep reading?
Actually, during this is when it was definitive that I hate Mary this season. It was specifically because of this episode.
Maybe it's because of your sexual side lurking underneath your perkiness.
She's just so mean to Lucy for no reason. There is a really funny part, though, where Lucy gets some tape.
Where's the tape? It's in the cabinet next to the oven.
And splits their bedroom in half so that she can have her side and her complete privacy. And Mary makes a pretty funny joke, actually.
I'll just leave. Something that you can't do. Because if you haven't noticed, the door is on my side of the room.
Yeah, I like that. I chuckled at that. It's fine. I still don't like Mary, though. The whole moral of this diary reading story doesn't end up being about Mary invading Lucy's privacy and her getting a talking to. That's where I would have hoped this storyline goes, but no. Where this ends up going comes completely out of left field.
Maybe we need to talk about sex.
Really? Annie starts telling Lucy about the night she was conceived.
I remember this dark, stormy night in this house. The lights went out, and your dad didn't get home until very late. I had forgotten that that day was Valentine's Day. That's the night that you were conceived.
And Lucy is stoked about it.
I was conceived on Valentine's Day? This is so cool. Why didn't you ever tell me before?
All because Lucy writes a lot in her diary about how she's been thinking about sex. That was the whole thing.
She reads my diary.
It's just stupid stuff, like she's petite, but she's thinking about sex all the time.
It wasn't about Mary being a little brat. It was about the fact that Lucy thinks about sex, and so her mom took that as an opportunity to tell her that story. What the fuck? Lucy is way too happy to be hearing the story of her conception.
I was conceived on Valentine's Day.
If you thought that plotline was crazy, wait till you hear about the main plotline of this episode. Simon finds a dirty child, brings her in, and asks if he can keep her.
Hey, look what I found. Can I keep her?
Do you think she's a dog? She's not. The girl has not spoken a word to anyone, and so Simon thinks that she doesn't talk, and also he's under the impression that she is an orphan. He just knows it. He can feel it in his bones.
I'm sure she's an orphan. I can feel it in my bones.
But Simon is acting weirdly possessive of this girl. Like, it actually made me very uncomfortable how possessive he was over her.
But if no one claims her, can we keep her?
Let's just pray we find her parents.
You're on your own on that one, Dad. I want her.
Nope. That's sus, Simon. That is so sus. He says other stuff like,
Can't let her go home, even if she wants to.
Like that. He lures her into his room with candy. He also says this.
This is my room. You can stay here as long as you like.
Eric goes to the police station to tell them they found the dirty orphan girl when a man who is not in his right mind stumbles into the police station and makes a loud ruckus.
Somebody help me! I've lost my little girl! I've got to get her back!
And yes, this man is in fact the father of the dirty child that Simon found. Turns out her dad is just as possessive over her as Simon is.
She needs me! I need her.
The only parent Sarah knows is me. She loves drunk old me, and nobody's gonna keep us apart.
nobody.
It is universally understood by everyone that her father is not fit to be a father. Apparently, he had been using her as a crutch and also as a method to get food.
My daddy is sick, and we run out of food all the time, so he needs me to go with him and ask people for money so we could buy stuff.
And any money he would get, he would spend on alcohol because he's at the severest stages of alcoholism, unfortunately.
If he doesn't drink a lot, he hurts real bad.
They discover that the little girl has a grandma that she's never met, and so they reach out to the grandma and introduce them, try and get her comfortable with the idea of living with her instead of with her dad. And this girl doesn't really understand. She loves her dad. She thinks that her dad really needs her, and she wants to go back to him. Really sad, super tragic situation. The whole family pitches in to help this man. They go and clean up his house. They buy him food for his fridge. They help him get set up with a really good AA group. They invite him to church and hope that he's going to become part of their congregation. A lot of effort to help this guy fix up his life so that he can actually have his daughter again, and he seems to be pretty intent on doing just that, so hopefully it works out. I don't know. We must assume because we don't find out.
You look good, Daddy.
Yes, Joe, you do look good.
But yeah, Sarah, the little girl, ends up going to live with her grandma, and Ruthie helps convince her that grandmas are awesome, so that all works out. A lot of heavy drama in this season. Heavy, heavy, heavy. We do get an interesting piece of information, though, about Eric and Annie. Apparently, they both get off on stress.
What is it about stress that is like such a...
Turn on.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stress around here.
Oh, it's a good thing we're married.
I think I figured out why their relationship works so well. Episode 20 is pretty good. This one's really fun. Ruthie is obsessed with a character that's kind of like Barney, but it's called Snappy.
Snappy the Stegosaurus, only the coolest dinosaur in the whole world, is doing a live show tomorrow in Glenna.
We end up discovering that the person who plays Snappy is one of Eric's ex-girlfriends, like from high school, and he's able to get in touch with her and get them a couple of tickets to go see Snappy.
I think we should go and have a snappy good time.
And they even get backstage passes. This does not go over well though, because Ruthie is mortified when she finds out that Snappy is actually just a crazy lady in a costume.
Ruthie, look! Pizza! Snappy good time.
This causes Ruthie to have a full-on mental break.
So what have we learned from all this, Ruthie? Question authority.
She starts questioning everything, like the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, God. Ruthie's asking the right questions here. Keep going, babe. Yeah, keep thinking.
Do you know the brush your teeth song? It goes something like this. Snappy, Debbie, whatever, please. I'm okay here. You can go.
Ruthie is full-on atheist at this point.
You know what else? I don't believe in God either.
Eric has a chat with her to, talk about God, I guess.
You don't believe in God, huh? Kind of gets me right in the heart, because God is so real to me.
All right, Eric, let's hear what you have to say. Why should I and this 6-year-old girl believe in God? I'll hear you out.
But you can't see God.
The wind is real, but you can't see the wind. See the leaves rustling in the trees.
Huh?
Because I believe in God, I find I can get through the bad things. And if I didn't get through the bad things, then I'd never be able to enjoy the good things.
I personally remain unconvinced. Sorry, Eric. But Ruthie falls asleep, and I think she just forgets about the fact that she was an atheist for a day. So maybe Eric's pep talk worked for her. Another major part of this episode is about Matt and prom. Some dude from church comes up to Eric and is like, please, you have got to get Matt to ask my daughter to prom. Apparently the whole school knows that Matt has not asked anyone to prom. Everyone's freaking out about it. He's the hottest shit at his school. Anyway, this dad is like, please just ask Matt if he'll take my daughter to prom. Matt says no at first, but then after much convincing, he says, all right, I'll ask her, but you're gonna figure out why I didn't want to. So something mysterious is going on with this girl. Her name is Connie, by the way. He does go up and ask her to the dance. Lucy and Mary witness this, and they're kind of freaking out a little bit. Again, something's going on with Connie. Well, Connie doesn't actually have a dress or anything to be prepared for prom, and then he decides that his mom is gonna make a dress for her. So Annie toils away all that night and all the next day because prom is the next day, and she makes makes a dress for her. It's pretty simple, so it probably wasn't extremely difficult to make. But still, I cannot believe that Annie just whipped up a prom dress out of nowhere for this girl. If her dad wanted her to go to prom so bad, why didn't her dad get her a dress? We finally learn why everyone was so weird about Connie.
How can I explain it in words that you'll understand? You just sent Matt off to the prom with
the high school harlot.
I mean, that's one way to put it. Connie has a bit of a reputation for sleeping around, and this time it's not a fake reputation or rumor. It is in fact true that she has slept around a bit. We learn this as she's talking to Matt at the dance and afterward, that she essentially has like an internalized misogyny, that she can't get by in this world without doing everything that men want her to do, which is why she ended up, you know, allowing her body to be used many times. But she and Matt, while they're at the dance, they actually hit it off really well and have a great time. They're like making out a ton, and there's a point where Connie stops everything. She's like, I think we should be done, and Matt's just like, oh yeah, sure. Unfortunate for her, but not surprising. Nobody has ever treated her with that kind of respect before. Connie is really grateful and happy that she got to go out with Matt, who was such a nice, respectful man. So that was a bit of a nice storyline, and at the end too, Matt mentions that he had a really good time and he would like to take her out again. We don't see her for the rest of this season. I kind of hope she comes back in the future. I doubt she will though. Either she'll turn into the next Wilson or she's just gonna be another Brian. My money's on her becoming a Brian that disappears into the continuity void. Episode 21, Mary and Wilson are officially back together. Why? Why is Wilson the only relationship that lasts longer than 2 episodes? Why Wilson? Rod and Jimmy are back in this episode again because they decide to shadow Eric for a school project. So they're like pseudo ministers for a week or something like that. You'd think it'd cause a little bit more drama with Lucy, but actually Wilson ends up introducing a new boy to Lucy, this kid named Kenny, and he seems pretty nice. I mean, I've never known a Kenny not to be a great guy, and this Kenny as well seems super cool, so that checks out.
It's pretty exciting meeting someone you're instantly attracted to. For me, at least, it's very nice to meet you.
We also learned that Matt got some fancy mystery job in DC, and he hasn't told his parents about it, but he's leaving to do the job for the summer in like a couple of days.
So when are you gonna tell Mom and Dad about your summer job?
Will you keep it down? I'll tell them when the time is right.
Hurry up and tell them already.
And then he plans to go to the University of Tennessee for school next year. So that's where we're at with Matt at the moment. Simon during this episode is trying to audition Happy for a dog food commercial. It's like a competition to see whose dog can do the best trick. He does this audition in like a classroom and he ends up getting put on TV, but they just put the audition. They don't bother to like have him do it in a studio and produce it at all. They just put the audition on TV.
Would you rather have your pow chow taken away or be a dead dog?
Okay, but it ends up being a very bad thing.
What is it, sweetie pie?
It turns out there's this other girl who's super spoiled and she sees the dog on TV is like, that's my dog.
That blonde creep stole my dog. See? That's Whitey.
Yeah, they named it Whitey. She's almost like a little Veruca Salt and her daddy just spoils her. Dad promises that he's gonna go get that dog for her because it did in fact used to be her dog. But that's to be continued in the next episode. It's a 2-parter. Going back to Mary and Wilson, since they're back together, there's part of this episode where Billy and Wilson are at the house. Mary and Wilson get so tired, they end up falling asleep on a bed together. Matt walks in on them asleep on a bed together and he gets pissed off. He starts yelling at them, getting so angry, like acting like he's their parent.
You two lost your minds!
Which isn't cool. I don't appreciate that. But Mary slaps him, which I also think is extremely uncalled for.
You have no right to talk to my boyfriend like that.
Boyfriend? You're acting more like he's your husband.
Mary has signed up to do a summer camp for basketball. For the summer camp, she had to do a physical at the doctor. Well, Annie gets a call from the doctor, and the doctor informs them
Mary's pregnant.
To be continued. Episode 22 opens up with Grandma Ruth, and initially I thought that they had recast her.
I packed my special occasion tie. What time's graduation?
But no, that's her. It just turns out she dyed her hair and she's been acting extra perky lately. That was a callback to the first season if you didn't catch that.
They sure pushed the envelope on perky.
Ruth is just such a fucking hypocrite, dude.
I cut my hair, it grew back. Hair does that.
If you look at him from the back, you wouldn't think he's a man. You just think, what pretty hair.
Why is it always women with terrible haircuts being the one to criticize boys when they have long hair? Can you explain that to me? At least I didn't have to see Grandma Ruth until the last episode of the season. I am grateful for that. Lucy in this episode breaks up with Kenny. She thinks he's too good for her because the only other guys that have been interested in her are kind of scummy. So she thinks that means she doesn't deserve someone better like Kenny. But Jimmy and Rod decide that Kenny is actually a good guy and Lucy definitely deserves. They kind of band together to support her, which is pretty cool. They tell Kenny he should show up to church and he does and sits next to Lucy and she apologizes for breaking it off with him and they are back together, I guess. Maybe Lucy will be dating Kenny in the next season? I don't know. We'll see. Also, Jimmy and Rod give a sermon in this episode.
I have but one single question I want you to think about today.
That's not something I expected to see. Matt gets a phone call from Hillary Clinton because that's the job, his mysterious job that he got in DC was to work for Hillary Clinton.
That was Mrs. Clinton calling to welcome me to her staff.
And they're all like really excited about that.
Wow!
Someone wrote in the comments that there was like a certain brand of Christianity out there that say that Seventh Heaven is actually way too liberal of a show to watch and it's not actually a Christian show and so you're not allowed to watch it. And I'm starting to think they might be right. The show is definitely a lot more liberal than a lot of Christians out there, that's for sure. The devil trying to infiltrate your mind. Watch out. The girl that wanted her dog back from the last episode, her dad comes and tries to get the dog. He like brings a lawyer with him and does successfully take back the dog. But Happy just runs away and goes back to the Camdens' house.
I was gonna bring her over myself this morning. Poor thing, cried most of the day yesterday. This is where she wants to be.
He let them take Happy back. That's a big L for Veruca Salt. Also, Grandpa and Ginger got engaged. They talk about it like 3 different times and it's really not that exciting, but they're acting like it's a really big deal. Good for you guys, I guess. The final plot twist. I'm sure you're just dying to know. Mary was pregnant, right? Annie and Eric confront Mary and she says, that's not possible because I haven't done anything at all that would cause me to become pregnant. The doctor got it wrong. Well, Annie calls up the doctor and turns out they did get it wrong because I guess when Annie took Mary to do a physical, she also did a physical and they mixed up their stuff and Annie is actually pregnant. So that's a fun little plot twist.
The doubt, the uncertainty.
I have something to tell you.
And no matter what.
We're going to have a baby, you and me, together.
I'm pretty sure the show is called Seventh Heaven because it's 2 parents, 5 kids, a family of 7, Seventh Heaven. But now there's 8 of them. So is it 8th Heaven? Also, Matt decides he's not gonna go to school in Tennessee after all. He is still gonna go do his summer job for Hillary Clinton in DC, but then he's gonna come back and be with the family so that he can help out and also see the baby. So Matt will not be gone next season, I would hope. And that's season 2! A wild ride, quite the roller coaster if you ask me. What did you guys think of this season? Please let me know in the comments. And based on the overwhelming feedback from the first video, if this video also does well, I will definitely be doing season 3, so don't you worry, my friends, I'm on the task. Thank you so much for supporting me and for watching this. This has been super fun for me to do. Y'all are great. If you really liked this video, if you could hit that like button, that helps me know that you did in fact like the video. You should absolutely subscribe as well because there is a weird phenomenon that happens when people subscribe to my channel. They end up getting really sexy and hot for some crazy reason. I don't know how it happens, but it does. So if you want to tip the scales, be a 10 out of 10, subscribe. See you in the next one. Bye!